I would like to call this meeting of the Optional Forms of County Government Study Commission to order. So it's quieting down. If you would lead the Pledge of Allegiance, Bob.
Everybody stand, please. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any announcements tonight? Shall we move to the approval of the minutes? Has everyone had a chance to look at the minutes?
Approval agenda.
I'm sorry, approval of the agenda. That's what what did I say?
You said announcements.
I'm sorry. Approval of the agenda.
I move we approve.
Any changes to the agenda?
Oh, okay.
Motion?
I move we approve the agenda.
Second? Vote?
Second.
Okay. I take it that was you, Phil?
That was one, but I was happily second it.
Phil had already seconded it, but it's good to know you're on board with us.
It was Brian.
Yeah, Brian's not here.
Brian's not here either.
Only his bit,
He's
apparently.
in the sky.
So Brian is online. Phil, are you there?
I am here. Yeah.
Okay, so Brian and Phil are both attending on phone. Move to the approval of the minutes. Has everyone had a chance to look over the minutes? Any changes to the minutes? Yes, Bruce.
One thing that I noted in the minutes was that Mr. Reagan spoke for 42 minutes. And the summary of his discussion is Mr. Reagan then explained he agreed that the current form of government is not efficient or effective. That was the case he was making to say that a benevolent dictatorship is more efficient and effective. Not that the current form was not efficient or effective. And then the next sentence is he also opined that some of the solutions being discussed may not achieve the goals of cost savings or better representations for citizens. He spent 30 minutes talking. There were a number of bullet points that he discussed. And while I realize it may not be feasible to transcribe the entire meeting, it doesn't seem like he's given a fair opportunity in the minutes as far as his discussion and at least putting bullet points down of what he talked about. It just doesn't seem like it's a good representation of his 42 minutes of speaking.
Any further discussion? Do we want to modify the minutes to put more information in about what Brent Regan said, or are we happy with them as they are? Vote to accept them?
I think it would be better to...
Vote to change, looks like it's rolling.
Okay.
So, Bruce, would you get together with Dave to work out what it is you want to put in?
Absolutely. So, thank you.
And Dave, perhaps since he did speak for 42 minutes, and I was one of those who was online and couldn't hear all of that, in the minutes you might refer to the fact that they could go online and look at the video and hear everything that he said, because I think we're going to have to start summarizing what people say.
Well, yeah, I don't think we're talking a transcript.
I noticed it in the last commission back in 2020, I don't know, the second to last one, that they actually did summarize some of the people who came forward and gave testimony. Certainly more than we've done in the instances we've had so far. So we might want to do that. And it's another reason why I suggested in a prior meeting that for those coming to testify before the commission, be given the questions and an opportunity, if they would like, discretionary, to submit what they have to say in writing, even in bulletized form.
Yes, in my experience, minutes are usually summarized, but we can put more detail in if we need to.
No, I don't think that Bruce is asking for a transcript of his 42 minutes.
No, I'm being suggest he was.
Yeah.
We can put more detail, more detail in. That's why I asked Bruce to get together with Dave to deal with that.
Yep.
So, thank you.
Okay. We will put the approval of the minutes on hold till our next meeting then. Moving on, I don't believe any reports or old business are pending. Therefore, why don't we go straight to our Commissioner Duncan and ex-Commissioner Green. Welcome. Thank you for coming. And if you would care to give us an opening remark. Make sure that your mic is reasonably close to whoever's speaking, because we had some problems with that last week.
You want to go first? Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to present. This is a topic, obviously, that was popular with me. I served as a county commissioner from 2011 through 2017, excuse me, and before that I spent 7 years on the Kootenai County Planning and Zoning Commission, 5 years as chair. So I saw a lot of county government before I became a county commissioner. And, you know, Dave, I don't really know what you want me to say. I mean, I don't need to give a bio up here or anything. You're not expecting that, are you?
No, basically we're trying to gather information on whether there is a possibility that another alternate form of government would be preferable, would be more effective.
Well, I think it's admirable that the current board is putting us forward to discuss, and that I hope that something, well, we'll see if something comes forward, and then the citizens of Kootenai County can decide, like they made a decision before.
Yes.
Leslie, your turn.
We can't hear you back here. Talk like you're at the bar, not at church.
Repeat that, please.
How about I just do this? Is that better?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So I am Leslie Duncan. I took,
Still can't hear you. Speak up.
oh boy.
That's a condenser mic. Hold it right in front of you, right like that.
I took office in January of 2019, so I'm about 2.5 years in. I enjoy the position very much. I feel like that the job or role of a commissioner is to be a representative of the constituents and the taxpayers in matters under the control of county government. I am tasked with being fiscally responsible with taxpayer dollars. Long-range planning is something else that I am interested in doing. Some boards in the past have tackled that as well. And I am also tasked with allocating funds to the other elected officials in the budget process so they can provide mandated services. I have also, with my background and everything, I like to make things more efficient and streamlined and not so burdensome. So I've kind of taken on some of the processes that we do and tried to make them a little bit better. So we're not spending so much time on things that maybe aren't as important as some of the other things that are important. I guess that's kind of about it. I mean, the budget's really important and being a representative to the taxpayers. And I guess I'll just stand for any questions.
Thank you both. Bob, do you have any questions?
Okay, considering your workload in the present job that you have as commissioner, how would you characterize your workload and your ability to get through it?
I consider the workload a full-time job. In the beginning, it was more than that. It was probably about 60 hours a week while I was learning how all the things worked in the county. And I would go on ride-alongs frequently with different departments to see exactly what the departments did. And I think that the workload is manageable, and it's what I make it. I can only prepare for meetings, and that would take me less than 40 hours a week, in addition to going to the meetings. But I choose to embark on other projects that take up more time. For instance, rewriting policy, our expenditure policy 930. We found that there were some issues with it. And so that was a project that I took on, that I spent hours meeting with different people who had input. and meeting with the elected officials and coming up with a good policy that the county could move forward on that actually alleviated some of responsibility on the commissioners. So I think the workload is doable. I'll give you just a little bit example. In the past 18 months, this report was run June 29th. In the past 18 months, I received 17,471 emails. I responded to 7,138 emails. Not all the emails we get require responses. And I do have emails from the other commissioners too. It was a report that was run for all three of us. So I'm usually able to get to emails within 24 hours. I fancy myself as a little bit organized, and so I kind of have a process now. I do certain things every Thursday, I do certain things every Friday, so it helps me keep track of what's going on. And frankly, I just really love the job. I love how fast-paced it is. I love how complicated it is. It's kind of up my alley. I'm an administrator by nature. I pay attention to detail, and it's just really fun. I just think it's a fun job.
Could I ask Commissioner Green to do the same?
Sure. I think the job is full-time. It is full-time. It's what you want to put into it. And then the other tasks, what Leslie was referencing to, I think was a lot of administrative tasks. We're also tasked with representing the county at multiple boards, and we split them up, divide them up. I don't remember how many I had to report that I specifically represented the county at on a weekly or monthly basis. And unfortunately, many of those were skipped because you just simply couldn't be where everybody wants you to be. And that was in addition to the other events where people would like to have a commissioner there, you know, to represent us. So the time constraint, you had to definitely pick and choose and do what you could get done. And also as a commissioner, even when we were out representing the county, we never could, this is a word that I came up with, we could never obligate the county by any one of us. Leslie can work in her office, or I could work in my office, but we couldn't make a decision because you had to have at least two commissioners and subscribe, be consistent with open meeting laws. So I sometimes would go to an event or a meeting with maybe an advisory board, or maybe I was representing us at KMPO or Post Falls Chamber of Commerce. People say, well, what are the commissioners going to do? Well, I can't tell you because I'm not sitting here with the other commissioners. We'll have to get this all in the room and discuss it and then take a vote.
Brian?
I don't have any questions at this time.
Tamara?
Yes. A comment, I guess, has repeatedly been made about a lack of efficiency between the commissioners and what was termed as the other silo positions, the other elected positions. Do you see that the current setup is the best way in order to work with the other elected officials? And that's not a negative, it's a positive. Is it a negative? How do you facilitate the interworkings of the different elected officials and make sure that everybody is equally represented, funded? I mean, I don't know the inner workings of that, and that's why I'm asking. I would like to know how that all works in the interrelations of these departments.
This was one of the most surprising things to me after sitting for the first 2 years that I watched the inefficiency of how we ran county government. You had the county commissioners that are responsible for creating policies, funding all operations of county government. Those were two primary tasks. Nobody else could obligate the county. Nobody else could tax you, sign a contract. If the assessor's office had I'll use the old example of the copier maintenance contract, they had to come to county commissioners to have that approved, that contract approved. Also, the frustrating part to me was, I remember when the county changed a major policy in employment, we went to at-will work, but the sheriff's office refused to do it. So now the county was operating with one elected official under a separate policy, bringing tremendous liability upon the county, and yet the sheriff was assuming his responsibility But he had no funding mechanism to pay if we got sued. But there was no mechanism for the county or the county commissioner to say, sheriff, whoever it was, you can't do that. There's not like, there's no hammer. I one time had another member of the public say, Dan, just cut their budget, cut the assessor's budget. That'll teach him. I said, that's unrealistic. He has a mandated task to do and a job to perform. I mean, you can't be punitive in that way. We still have to fund and operate county and provide the services that were mandated and not mandated to do.
So what would your solution have been to that problem?
Well, I always said, you know, we have the kind of form of government all over that I would hope we would have here. I'll go simplest comparison is a school district. You elect board members to construct and to determine policy for the school district. They hire what they call a superintendent. I'll call it a CEO. You can call it a manager, whatever you want. It's all a matter of semantics. Who then goes out and hires principals to administer the policy that's been adopted by that school board. It's difficult enough having a 3-member CEO to operate. I mean, just the functionality of it. And then when we sit with the elected officials, and I guess it always comes down to the personalities of the electeds at that time. But sometimes the dysfunctionality, if you were to be able to be a fly on the wall and sit through a few elected officials meetings when there's a topic that we have trouble agreeing on, which usually went around employee relations or compensation, it's a fascinating discussion. And everybody wants to have a vote, but really the BOCC has the vote because they're the ones that have been tasked with funding operations.
I guess the one clarification with the school board is that's one thematic group, all for one purpose. Whereas the row officials are separate. They do have separate tasks that are mandated. So having that level of separation, it's not performing one thing from the superintendent to the school board to the teachers to our principals to the teachers to the students. That is one streamlined thing. But the different elected officials have different functions and different tasks.
You're right, Darren, but I would challenge and say that the other elected officials, all their duties are mandated in the statute. They don't make policy. They do, the assessor does, and I'm not picking on the assessor.
Oh, no, yeah.
They do what they're supposed to do. I think the two other elected officials that probably have the most policy or discretion would be the prosecutor and the sheriff. Mm-hmm. Prosecutor, should we pursue this case or not? The sheriff, we can give some latitude. I was reading about boat weights today, giving some discretion on a boat weight. But really, all their other tasks are dictated in statute. They don't make policy for the county. They cannot obligate the county. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
So I look at it not necessarily siloed, but I have really made it a goal to not only maintain but pursue relationships with the other elected officials, because I look at us as a team. My responsibility is to give them their resources that they need to function and to provide those mandated services. So with and I've witnessed this with school boards and superintendents, the superintendent ends up running the school board, and the school board that is supposed to be making the policy, supposed to be approving the curriculum and doing those things, just doesn't happen anymore. It's the superintendent now is running the board, and the board is just a rubber stamp. And so I'm very concerned about mimicking that kind of operations on the scale of county government, because especially when you have, in my opinion, in my experience, when you have more members of a board, then less people do the work. You still have 80-20 rule, and I just think that that's not something that is going to create more efficiency or more effectiveness. It's going to create even more dysfunction in my mind, what I've experienced with the different boards and stuff. I think relationships are key. I don't have great relationships with everybody yet, but I would say out of the 6, I have 4 very solid relationships, and 2 I will continue to work on. But we have very professional relationships, and we're able to come to agreements and understanding, I think, the different roles, and respect has a lot to do with it. I was working with LAPD during Rodney King era, and they were just getting hammered and beat up, and I went in there and I just showed that department how much respect, that they deserved, because they were doing a great job, and they were obviously under great fire. And so what that showed me is, even if I disagree, even if things are going poorly and badly, respect goes a long way. And that's how I run things, and I have repaired relationships, I have gained trust, and that's how come 4 out of the 6, I feel like there's an equal trust relationship with that. And I think one of them I probably will never have that type of relationship with, but that's okay. And then the other one is just, we just haven't known each other long. So I don't know. Is that all of your question? Pretty much.
I think so. I have another one, but we'll come back to it later.
Thank you. Sherry?
No questions for right now.
Kristen?
I do have a question. I don't know if this is the time or if I should get a little bit more information. What I keep hearing is that there is dysfunction, and that's okay. There are roadblocks, and that's okay. And I agree to a certain extent that is okay. Part of that's your give and take, your checks and balances. But what's coming through more as a theme is that there are certain role officials who have certain tasks to do, and they're in that position and they do that job. If they don't do that job well, then really the commissioners, as you said, cannot do anything about it, because it's not realistic to think you can cut the budget. You do that and all of us citizens are hurt, and probably there's a lawsuit. So I'm trying to figure out how within our current structure there's a way to take what's good and then identify the things that don't work and fix them, or is that not possible within the current structure?
I think with relationships, anything's possible. And I think part of the issue is, because I hear it both ways, and I don't know how it can be both ways, that, okay, there's dysfunction, people aren't working well together, there's problems, but then you have the citizens who have no idea what's going on. So if the citizens knew what was going on with these different elected officials, they're the ones to hold these elected officials accountable. So being able to
Ladies and gentlemen, I would ask you to hold this down. This is being broadcast for other people. Please, if you want to approve her, do so afterward.
Can everybody talk like you just did? We can hear you.
Sorry.
I hope the rest of you can broadcast as well.
Are you guys doing public comment?
No,
We will not be doing public comment tonight.
When?
So I think that's part of the issue is trying to be respectful and not going to the paper, not going to the public. But I think we're also doing a disservice, and maybe the citizens need to understand some of the problems we're having. And right now today, I could say that there isn't a problem that I would take to the newspaper today. But I have been seriously considering some of these issues, and actually some of them work themselves out. But that's one way that I can see exerting pressure on another elected official. And we can absolutely, the board can choose to meet with an elected official off record. We call it an executive session, which most of you are familiar with, and be able to say, look, this is unacceptable. We cannot have you putting the county at risk. I know that there's one county that their insurance actually came and said, we're not insuring that elected official anymore because their behavior is so bad. And so that is also an option. None of the options are good. And to Dan's point, you can't just go in and cut the budget so the statute, the statute-driven services are cut. But there are other things that you can do. You can actually cut the elected official's salary. You can't do that mid-year, but we could say, okay, as of October 1st, unless these things happen, you're going to halftime. And of course, that's going to be public record because everything financial is public record. So I'd rather not get to that extreme. And like I said, I've been working harder on relationships. But coming forward, if there is something that is not resolvable by the tools we have, then I'm thinking, we're going to have to start going to the press and saying, this is not good for the taxpayers, and the taxpayers need to understand what you're doing, and they need to hold you accountable.
That actually wasn't quite what I was getting at. I was hoping that I would hear that within the structure, without having to go external to the structure and to the press, that you could resolve the issues. But I understand your point that as a last resort, you may feel you have to do that. Mr. Green, would you please comment?
Well, and speaking of Leslie, I think I had good relations with most of my other elected officials. We always had, times when we didn't see eye to eye, but we also know we had a job to do for the citizens. And what was nice is, the elected officials aren't subject to the open meeting law because they're only one. We don't have to hear what's thinking in their head so I could invite an elected official into my office and we could have a discussion without another commissioner there. I was not violating an open meeting law because no decisions could be made. Yeah. But the challenge, we mix two the commissioners across the state are tasked with making policy and tasked with running the administration, daily operations of the county. Now, we don't manage the assessor's office. We don't manage the sheriff's office. But I'm always amazed when the other elected officials talk about their employees in the assessor's office or the sheriff's office. But the check says Kootenai County employee across the top. So I've never really understood whose employees they are. Another elected official cannot give an employee a raise unless it's approved by the county commissioners. It's really a tough way to run the business side of county government. It's not the policy side that I struggle with. It's how to make county government more efficient and a better use of dollars, just like Leslie does. She's coming from a different angle. But how can we accomplish those things and bring in the level of expertise that we need? Many people have been elected county commissioners, and they're in there for the right reason, but they don't always bring the skill set. Now, what do you have, a $100 million a year company here now? It was $75 million a year company when I was here. That's big money, and it requires a skill set. And when I asked some of my friends, why don't you run for county commissioner, that I think have that skill set, well, the answer is no. That's really not the answer. That's the polite thing, is their no, because they don't want to, it's a shooting gallery up here for county commissioners in North Idaho. It's a tough job. It takes a certain heart and a certain patience and stuff like that. And I would really have enjoyed being able to spend more time working on policy issues than all the administration of running the office on a daily basis.
And I think that's really important. Many times you can end up with 3 commissioners that have complementary skill sets. And so Dan would want to work on policy, I would want to work on administration. And we have some that are good with employees, and then we have some that are good with, mechanics. I don't know. But I think that playing off each other's skill level is really good. Like, Chris Filios is an appraiser. And so in Board of Equalization, he adds a whole other level and layer of understanding that helps the whole board make decisions. Well, at least he helps me. I shouldn't speak for anybody else, but his expertise helps me make decisions. And I hope that sometimes my expertise in different areas can possibly help them as well. So skill set's very important. You have to have a basic level. And for me, the basic level is you got to be a quick learner, and you have to be able to understand complicated inner workings, because just Board of Equalization alone is very complicated. But that's kind of a luck of the draw. I mean, whatever the skill sets are, I think the 3 commissioners need to recognize each other's strengths and weaknesses and be able to work together so you do get a good product in the end.
Joan?
Yes, last week we heard testimony from Brent Reagan regarding the kind of the structure at Ada County, which is a larger county than us. And they hired a COO, a county operating officer, to assist them with some of the administrative functions. And I haven't seen this job description, so I'm just assuming that they're helping in the day-to-day operation and facilitating more of the communication between the BOCC and the elected officials. And I would just like to know what your feelings are about that, whether you think it's a good idea, a bad idea. Evidently, it's something we can do without changing our current structure.
For me, I don't want anybody in between me, my department heads, or the other elected officials, because that destroys relationships right there. When you have a middleman who has their own agenda, which doesn't have to be a bad agenda, it's just they have their own agenda, getting their job done, how they decide they want to get their job done. I don't want anybody between me and the others. I work on my own relationships. I learn what other people do, what other people need. So for me, I wouldn't like that aspect of it. Now, if we talked about different administrative functions, which you would have to give me, an example. I mean, would they start signing contracts for the board? So I would kind of need, and Dan will hopefully speak to this. But for me, the relationship part, I don't need anybody in between me and the other people here. We are getting a system called OnBase, and that's going to take care of some of our administrative things. In the meetings, we'll be able to sign the documents right there on our computer. So there are efficiencies being worked towards right now without that extra body.
Joan, that's a great question. I love this one because not this board, I think the previous board hired, I don't really know her, Nancy Bluff, is that her name? And actually does a lot of financial analysis, which to me is part of a COO kind of an operation. I do know Ada has a person like that to relieve the commissioners of some of the tasks, and really the commissioners can authorize anybody they want by a vote of the BOCC to sign things on their behalf. I mean, when I was on vacation, I could give my stamp to my support person to, if you saw the documents we would sign, I don't know, 50 to a day, 100 a day, Leslie? 100 a day we sign. It's rubber stamping what other elected officials have done for the most part. But actually, what Brent or what Ada has done was already done here. And see, I haven't heard a lot about the historical context. Back in, I would say it was probably 97, 98, Dick Compton was one of the commissioners, and he was an IBM retired executive, very bright guy. He proposed this county administrator, and they actually hired a man named Tom Taggart, who at that time was the county clerk. He was the elected county clerk. Hey, Tom, why don't you come over here and be our administrator? And Tom had the skill set. But what happened? Now the other elected officials didn't really want to talk to Tom as much because he was no longer elected. He wasn't at their level. And it kind of failed, and Tom Taggart wound up going to Lakeland School District and being the administrator there for the next 15 or 20 years or whatever until he retired. It really does come down to personalities. I mean, the board, whoever makes up the other electeds, how much they always want to, the messaging is they want to work in unison, but when you come down and say, no, you can't have that money, or you can't have that employee, or you can't have that new car, they're not quite as lappy. But we did try that, and I think it's not getting at the root problem of the dysfunction, but it is a step in the right way that would allow commissioners to potentially participate in more activities that we literally don't have the time for. Is that safe to say, you think? Yeah, possible. Okay, I'm not speaking for Leslie.
Okay, thank you.
Kurt?
So following up on your last comments, Dan, Leslie's already said she doesn't think there's root dysfunction necessarily. There's just mixed messaging going on. What do you view the root dysfunction to be?
I would sit there when we were trying to come up with, and it's always about employee compensation, and we were trying to come up with who was our competition. Who was our competition that we're going to compare ourselves to? And every elected official would pick up the end, wouldn't want to go to the border or to the job description that supported their case. Trying to come up with a group that we were going to agree with that said, this is who we're going to compare ourselves to. Other, a county next door. Are we going to go to Spokane? Are we going to Seattle, Boise? And you could tell it was based on where they were going to get the data that was going to support their position. And and ultimately though, they don't have that say. And as a commissioner, we take their input. But at the end of the day, that was the commissioner's role, to fund operations. And it's, at some point, somebody has to make the decision. It's tough enough when there's three of us trying to make the decision. It gets even tougher when you have people that really don't have a vote. Actually, don't have a vote at the table, but they want to have a vote at the table.
Right. So the other elected officials trying to make the case on the behalf of their employees or their department. Is that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I applaud them for advocating. But they're the ones that are going back and telling their employees, I saw emails. We're fighting for you. Don't worry. We're fighting with the commissioners. Well, it makes us look really good. And then we're telling the taxpayers we're trying to pull down their spending. I could make the employees happy, give them all raises. And many of these people in this room are really not going to be happy with me.
Right. Okay. Leslie, any comments?
Sure. So what people view as dysfunction, I view as deliberation. So I want that feedback. I want the checks and balances. I want to understand what the other departments need. We have a couple departments that they were just like bleeding employees, and they had statutory requirements that had to be addressed. So we had to make certain adjustments for those individual departments, because typically we like to work the county as a whole, and so we like to work as a whole. But for me, I enjoy that deliberation where it gets to the point where, and once again, I have to have a second person to back me up on this, especially in budget deliberations. It's like, okay, thank you, Mr. Bushling, you've asked, for what you need. Now I'm going to make a decision. Whereas we've allowed Mr. Bushling or whoever it is to come up and badger us into changing our minds. And I don't play that way. And this budget season, I've asked again. We've heard the information. We're going to make a decision. We don't need to be badgered. We don't need to hear another argument. What we need to do is say that looking at the county as a whole, these are where the resources need to go, and then make the decision. So I think some of that can be cut out, but once again, it's personalities. It's something that I don't care to continually revisit. Okay, I like the input, and okay, you've given me your input, and remember, I've got input from all this other thing, and then I make the decision that I think is best for the county as a whole. And way more needs always than resources. So you kind of have to, look at things a certain way. And I know, because I get lobbied alone, not just as the board. I get lobbied alone. And I just say, you know what, thank you. I appreciate your input, but I'm still going to make this decision because there's a dozen other things that I can't even tell you about. And I encourage them, hey, run for commissioner. You'll have lots of fun.
Thank you. Bruce?
Yes, thank you. Well, Mr. Green, you'd mentioned a little bit earlier that sometimes a commissioner has to say, perhaps to the sheriff, you can't do that. Does that not go the other way, where someone says to the commissioner, you can't do that? Last week, Mr. Matheson gave a great example where he said he wasn't going to sign a check for a commissioner. And that was a real check against power in a sense. But you have an elected official saying to another elected official, I'm not going to give you this check because I don't think you're doing this the right way in order for this expense to be made. And so, given that that's our current form of government, any other proposed government with a county manager having the treasurer report to that manager, who ultimately reports to the Board of Commissioners, where is that check and balance, in essence, when it comes to the money?
Bruce, that's a great question. And I guess I would go back to whether it's a city or a school district, they have checks and balances, and you'd have to, um, I can't specifically speak to what Steve was talking about last week, but I know if I know Steve Batson, and I really enjoyed working with the guy, and we still have lunch together. His interpretation of statute sometimes might be different than mine, but that's his. And he does have a certain amount of autonomy when he say, don't, I'm not going to process that check. Actually, he doesn't process the check. This is what's interesting. The clerk's office processes the check. So I'm not sure how Steve could tell you don't process the check. But
Well, he said it was him and the clerk that
now
approved
okay.
these things. So.
Okay. But is that, I guess I would ask, what's the check and balance of the city? There's still audits to be done. We would have annual audits here. I'm not specifically speaking. Now, I'm going to back Steve. If the commissioners were doing something that was either, I wouldn't say unethical, but especially illegal, I'd back them 100%. So I don't have a really, speaking that specific instance, I don't know where the sheriff ever came and told us, whether it was Sheriff Watson or Sheriff Walker, you can't do that, commissioners. We didn't, no more than he answered to us than we answered to him.
Part of the reason I asked that is just because I know in the private sector, if someone's caught embezzling funds or misappropriating funds, it's very hard to convict someone like that. And so, for example, I know back in 2012, you had stated that the county would probably save about $1 million if they changed the form of government. I don't know if you recall that.
No, specifically. I remember talking about how we reduced the commissioner's hours, looking, redundancy and efficiencies, but I don't remember exactly saying that figure.
It says here the county could save $1 million by shaving 2% off the budgets of officials impacted by the ballot measure. So, how did you arrive at that number?
Watching at that time what I thought were inefficiencies, and I hear Leslie still trying to talk about it and look at some of the ways we spend money. We're just, for coming from the private sector, I would never do it.
No.
And 2%, I mean, when we're talking $75 million, 2% is $1.5 million, right? So I mean, it adds up in a hurry. It doesn't take long.
No, I understand, and I guess part of it is just the fact that, how much money are we saving because we have a Steve Matheson who's really checking how this money is being spent, and because he's there, and because the commissioners know that a guy like him is going to look at these expenses, how much money are we saving because of that?
I couldn't tell you, and Steve doesn't determine how we spend money.
I understand, but he does play a check on that, though. Like if the commissioner wants to just start spending money willy-nilly and he just rubber stamps it, then that could cost the county a lot of money.
I guess it would take two commissioners to start spending money willy-nilly. One commissioner cannot obligate the county anyway.
Okay.
So I'll give you another example where a check and balance is good. The assessor's office. If the commissioners decided in BOE to arbitrarily lower the value of a property, and the assessor felt that that was inequitable and unfair, the assessor takes the commissioners at Board of Equalization to court, and they do it that way. So in the example of the treasurer, we would take him to court if we felt that his obligation, his ability to write the check or whatever, if we felt it was still necessary to do that. I do know of the instance that you're talking about, and it's legitimate. I'm glad that he stood up and said, I'm not going to write that check, because that was kind of a wake-up call to say, hey, this is not an appropriate expenditure of taxpayer dollars, and I really appreciated that. Offline.
The court, your county prosecutor, we hire outside counsel.
We have to hire outside counsel because there's a conflict, because a lot of the civil attorneys represent more than one elected official. Yeah. And so, they conflict out really quickly. They don't want to ruin those relationships at all.
Brian, I would believe that was you just now. Do you have any other questions? Brian Cleary?
No, that's cool.
Phil, do you have any questions?
Yeah. Yes, I do, if I could.
Please.
The biggest thing to clarify, and if people scan me because on the phone, come to us, if you don't mind, I want to bring Commissioner Duncan and bring his comment. Let me say first, I really appreciate the two of you being here, and I appreciate the fact you're there, and I apologize that I'm not, but I had to be out of town for tonight. I do apologize. But the conflict in any government is resolving the distinction between administration and legislation. And the system we have is worked across the country. It seems to work here. And I don't think anyone's saying it's not working. It's just when you consider all across the country, most municipal jurisdictions of 100,000 people have gone to some modification of the commission form of government. Now, it may include a county manager, may include a chief executive officer elected, they may went to a strong man. And the idea is not to create a go-between between the departments, which operate under legislation, and the elected officials. It's that the maximum input of information, expertise basically, is coming to the elected officials who are making those decisions. Now, and maybe today, 2021, what we have is working. But the distinction typically in municipal governments is the amount of service they provide. Typically, cities themselves always provide more services in unincorporated areas. But at the same time, as the cost of services has increased across the country, there's resorted to consolidation of services. So that county government in many places is actually growing. And I see no reason why not to anticipate there will be growth within Kootenai County as well as the service we need to provide. With that in mind, not getting into specifically what form of government, do either you see any reason that a manager of some type could provide the expertise you need to make better decisions? And then, secondly, would board commissioners make the job more effective and more representative to people? Irrespective of what we call it, commission, council manager, whatever. Just getting to effectiveness is a possibility of what people doing the elected office, the commissioners, and some type of administrator being more advised of everyone. Would that help and make a better government for the people of Kootenai?
Thank you for your question. I'm going to try to answer it. It's really difficult to hear you. First of all, for the increase in services and the increase in costs, we're always looking for better ways to leverage our technology. And we're serious about our 5-year plan in our IT department. So we're trying to implement some new technologies to help alleviate some burden with some services. The other thing is I actually have what I need right now. I have a communications manager. I have a business analyst. I have an auditor's department. I have department heads who are experts in their fields. I have a great administrative supervisor. I already have everything I need right now to make good, solid decisions. And I feel like if you look at my track record and listen to my arguments the last 2.5 years, I feel like I have that right now with the staff we have. There are some efficiencies I think we could do on the third floor, but once again, I've got my plan. So I'm working on procedures first, and then we can work on reorganization later. But I hope that answers your question. I feel like right now I have all the experts I need, and I have good relationships with the assessor. So I spend a lot of time with him when my role crosses with his role. The same thing with the treasurer, the same thing with the clerk. The clerk in district court. I need to know a lot about district court because I am the liaison with the judges and with the clerk. So that is one of our mandated services that is absolutely falling behind in manpower. And I kid you not, to me, America is not America without a strong justice system. And if we are not backing our judges and our prosecutor and our public defender and our court clerks, then we're really losing, we're in danger of losing the quality of our life. So I feel like I have the expertise that I need right now to make solid decisions.
Thank you, Commissioner Duncan.
Phil, that's interesting because since I've been here, Leslie just mentioned, I think, 3 people that have been added to her staff that weren't here when I was here, which probably just ran up a couple hundred, $250,000 in salary and benefits that, you know, that in all honesty, the commissioners were doing back then. And again, and maybe, and wouldn't be surprised they're being done better now than by the commissioners that were in place at that time. Interesting. I don't think this type of government too is appropriate for all counties in Idaho. You know, we have 44 counties, and when I was a commissioner, 26 of the 44 counties in Idaho had less than 20,000 people. We have grown. We're bigger, you know, than it's a much bigger machine that we have here now. Part of my challenge, and this is going to get me a little hot water, but as I sat there on the planning commission and before I ran, I thought we should get more good applicants for the job. But it's not supposed to be a job, but that's what we made it. It's supposed to be public service. And one time Mike McDowell and I got sideways because he was upset. I never supported raises for the elected officials because it's supposed to be public service. Mike goes, but you're impacting my retirement. Well, yeah, but it's not supposed to be a job, Mike. So it was a philosophical difference there of what it was to be a commissioner or a treasurer or a prosecutor. But I do know those are their careers. Barry McHugh, that is his career, and I respect him for it. And those are tough decisions that we're faced with on what do we do, you know, how we pay those people that have raised their hand to run for office. You know, it still goes back to when I see a school, the cities here. A couple different forms, but basically they have a mayor and a city council. The mayor generally hires a city administrator, or that's what they call him, and they they manage the daily operations, the minutia of running city government. And their police chief, if they have a police department, reports to the city. I'm not proposing that we have Sheriff Norris report to the county commissioners or work for the county commissioners. That's his role is outlined in state constitution. That's way over. But I do think we have some elected officials that are so administrative in nature and do exactly what statute tells them to do that it would be better to go out and find people with that skill set to do the job. Right now we have a coroner that's a doctor. That's great. Other counties have coroners that aren't medical people. That's not good, I don't think. But anyway, Bill, I guess that'll stop there. I'm getting off on a tangent. I'm sorry.
Thank you both. I appreciate your honesty and your answers.
Dave, I know you've been taking notes. Do you have questions?
And I'll go around next time.
Okay. I'll pass also. Bob?
I thought I would ask a question that's kind of speculative in nature, having to do with when we'll, accept change in this county, under what conditions. As we all know, counties down south and Ada County they're still operating under the same guidelines that we're operating under, with 3 commissioners, and they're moving along very nicely, and they're also growing. I wonder more along the lines what the voting public will accept, considering the size we're in and the speed of growth. It's more difficult to manage when you're growing as fast as we are. Uh, what what conditions do you think would be acceptable to our voting public for instance, increasing the number of commissioners to 5 from 3? Other states, of course, almost always have more than that. So, to answer some of the problems that Mr. Green has mentioned, uh, most of them that I've talked to would have an elected sheriff and prosecutor, perhaps, but not the others. At some point in time, we have to make changes along those lines. The question is whether it is now or a bit later. How would you respond to those comments, Mr. Green?
Well, I'm proud that the voters got to vote on something I promoted, and it didn't get on the ballot because Dan Green supported it. Todd Tondy and Jay Nelson both also supported putting it on the ballot and giving the citizens a vote. People say that I'm taking away, back then I was taking away their right to vote. They got to vote, and I respect their decision. I didn't agree with it, but you know what? I didn't win every vote on the Board of County Commissioners either. That's okay. I think moving to 5, diluting the responsibilities of the board and how we could represent each other. And I will tell you, and I haven't worked with Leslie as a commissioner. I worked with her when she was, on one of her advisory boards. But it's really hard not violating the open meeting law as a county commissioner when you walk down the hall and Leslie, I got a question for you. And gosh, am I breaking the law right now? But if there were 5 of us, 2 of us could have the discussion. And it's not an intentional. It's just geez, am I taking you can't take testimony, you can't deliberate to a decision. Those are kind of the benchmarks for violating open meeting law. I think when the ballot proposition went up before, there were a lot of people that were okay with the clerk, the coroner. Does he have 1 employee still, or does he have 2? Expansion, I love it. We got more bodies, okay. Anyway, when I was commissioner, when this was up, the coroner had 1 employee, the assessor, or the treasurer had 6 employees, and the assessor, he had more, he had 40. But his decisions, again, no matter what people think, his decision in assessing your property value does not determine your tax bill. It's one of the most, and he oversees the DMV registration too. But when you start getting in the clerk, who also controls elections, that was a very sensitive subject. And I think that would be very hard for voters in this county to accept without change. I mean, Cliff Hayes was in office when I was there, and he ran a tight ship, and then is passing it. Jim Brandon is passionate about elections and also runs a tight ship. And I wouldn't propose you put anything up removing them from elected, because I think it's going to go down really fast. Just as if the prosecutor and the sheriff were not elected. Yet even every city, not every, it's kind of funny. We have 14 cities in Kootenai County. Most people don't know we have 14 cities in Kootenai County. 5 of them have police departments. But none of those police chiefs are elected on or voted in by their citizens. But that's not going to change here. I know that. And don't kid yourself. That can answer your question. I mean, I'm giving you my political bias here, I guess.
Could I get clarification there? So did you say in answer to Mr. Fish's question that you would see 5 as a potential improvement, because at least you could walk down the hall and chat with another commissioner and not have it considered a breach of the open meeting law?
Not only that, but I used to have a spreadsheet on my wall, and I listed all these organizations I was supposed to be at. Some of them the commissioners assigned me to. Some of them I wanted to attend periodically, whether it's the Coeur d'Alene Chamber or whatever. I was assigned to the Rathdrum Hayden Chamber, but I wanted to go to the Coeur d'Alene Chamber once in a while, or in the different advisory boards that I was the liaison to.
there wasn't a chance. I mean, if I used to check them off, if I got to everybody within every 6 months, I was doing well because my primary role was here. And some of it was, again, signing stuff. Uh, my favorite was the check roll, the check register. Have they heard about the check register? The county does a check run every week. And by statute, the clerk's office runs it. When I was a commissioner, it was a $700,000 average, weekly average. The commissioners would receive it on Thursday, and we had to sign it by Friday with no backup behind this printout saying we authorize these expenditures. I mean, I was signing my life away every week. This is crazy. And yet, county government couldn't go on if we didn't do that every week. So those are the kind of tasks that maybe with 5 commissioners, we could dilute some of the responsibility, and you could get to more events where people want you, and or the county needs to be represented on.
So I, of course, have a little bit of a different take. I agree in the dilution, but in the opposite way. I think that going to 5 would dilute some of the responsibility, not in what we have to do, but dilute the responsibility of taking ownership. And as 3 people, you're forced to educate yourself and to be engaged. And I think going to 5, I think you would have a lot less engagement. Like I mentioned before, 80-20 rule. So I think that being able to talk to another commissioner can be helpful, but once again, that's the public's business being done behind closed doors. So even if it's not illegal, I think it can lead to a serial meeting because Dan comes to me and he says, oh, I got this idea. I'm like, wow, that sounds pretty good. And then it just so happens that I'm meeting, with Tamara later and then I accidentally say, what do you think about this idea? Okay, now you just created a serial meeting. Now you have just done deliberations for 3 out of the 5 boards. So I think that having legal sit down with the 3 commissioners and be able to weigh in on where that line is, because it's a fine line. There's a lot of administrative stuff that has to go on. But there have been times where I've walked down the hall and one comment or one administrative suggestion leads into a lot more. It's like, okay, stop. Now, what just happened to us needs to happen Monday when we're talking about this. And I have tried to be diligent to say, okay, last week, this is what we talked about, and that's how you cure those open meeting violations. I think that we should be able to do workshops, but once again, we have legal opinion. That is kind of, I think, maybe going with too much of the letter and not the spirit of the law, because there's education, there's things that we need to talk about. So I'm willing to work on that end to be able to address certain issues, but this is why we have status update on Mondays. I mean, any commissioner can bring anything forward and say, hey, I'm thinking about this idea and bounce it off. Hey, do you agree with that? Do you want to pursue that? And the public's business should be done in public. So I guess that's kind of where I'm at. Going back to, I think the voters of Kootenai County have become so sophisticated that if you can prove to them that there is a better way, then I think that they would vote for change. But right now, I'm in the job. I love the job. I am not having to work outside of my 40 hours unless I choose to. And I choose to a lot because I really like the job. I'm sick. I don't know why. But I think that if change is going to happen, it's got to be sold, not based on, I think this might work. There is no other, county in the state of Idaho, excuse me, who's gone from this. And we're the 3rd largest, but I still think there's at least 5 counties that are over 100,000 people. So I don't know that that's a magic number where now you need to start looking at alternate forms of government. I think that for me, this is still workable and doable, but it requires dedication to the issues, to things that are boring. I mean, there's things that I know more about tertiary treatment for sewer plants than I ever wanted to. I'm telling you what. But now I can make the decisions. I can actually listen to the argument from the engineers, not my favorite at all. But then I can say, you know what? I think that's right. I think this is the direction we should go based on this, that, and the other. So to Dan's point, there's more fun things that I would probably like to do that we're not freed up to do. But once again, if I have my way and I'm able to take some of these burdensome processes and stuff that we can farm off and do something different with, and like I said, this on-base system, I'm really hopeful for it. That's going to alleviate some of our administrative issues. I don't know. It works for me.
I take it from your comments, you feel that you would accept it under certain conditions, or would, based on what you know now, you would not accept, which is the very basic and simplest change that could be put on the ballot, I think, is the, increasing to 5 with related costs and things of that nature.
No,
Would you
I
accept
think
it?
the simplest thing that could be put on the ballot.
Please don't interrupt.
Yeah, sorry.
And do you think that if properly sold, it could be sold to the public?
Well, I wouldn't use sale as the basis for it. You have to have real reasons for it. And being able to talk to another commissioner is not a reason to me. So I would not support going to 5 at this point. I really think that the consequences, the unintended consequences, are going to be worse than what the difficulties we have now.
Yeah.
And you know what? Government's messy. It's deliberative. It's designed to be that back and forth, almost antagonistic. And that's okay. Conflict is okay. It just has to be handled respectfully. And that's what my goal is to try to do over and over and over again. Because I love this county. I love the people. And it's the only reason why I'm here. I had a good life, just like you did before, this. And I think it really makes us appreciate the life we get to go back to when we're better.
Mr. Green, the main thing to you is, based on your experience and knowledge of the community, do you think that would have a chance to be voted on by the public? Just 5.
I think when the ballot measure was in 2012, it was too big a bite. Yes, I think the change was too much. I'm going to have a little different approach, and Leslie and I, we talk. I like she calls me periodically and asks, "What'd you do here, Dan? And did you ever hear about this?" So we have a fun. We don't always agree, but we have a fun, working, still collaborative effort. I had my own company, and if I had to run my own company, the way we run county government on the administrative side, not the policy side. This is where we got to segregate here. I would have gone broke a long time ago, making decisions at that very slow speed. And it is meant to be deliberative. I absolutely agree. What I think is fascinating, though, when I sit here, of all the governments we have in Kootenai County, we're the only one that operates like this because we're county government. Cities, highway districts, they have a board and they hire an executive director, basically, to facilitate the ongoing daily operations. School boards, city councils. I mean, how about at the state level? The state, we have a CEO running, but it just, we're talking about how this is the best way. But county government was set up by the state when the state was formed. And it was done to provide certain services, mandated services that we still do today. But really, I think if you look at historically, state governments were set up to be land banks. They're sitting here holding the land until the cities annex in. I believe I think Ada County has less land in county operations than city operations now. We will someday, when Rathdrum, Post Falls, Hayden, and Coeur d'Alene get done annexing the prairie, the county's responsibility on land is going to go way down. And that's what we still will provide those mandated services of treasurer, assessor, jail, solid waste, because that's what we're designed to do. So anyway, I guess my point is, I'm trying to think about the administrative side of county government. And when I watched what I've seen, how slow decisions are made, how we don't have expertise at times, especially in commissioners, because they doesn't mean they're bad people. They're more people. They're not great people they want to serve, but they maybe don't have, somebody guiding them with the answers and the technical knowledge. I think we can be more efficient. And I know Leslie wants to be more efficient too. It's just two different paths.
Thank you.
Brian?
Mr. Green, I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. Did you say that as the population grows, we may need to look at changing our form of government, or did you make some sort of correlation between those two?
No, I didn't. That we need. No, our form of nothing more than we're talking about here. I'm just saying that the size of Kootenai County's population has made our operation much more complex. I remember our weekly expenses were $700,000. I don't know what they are now. When I was a commissioner, I was buddies with a Boundary County commissioner. That was more than his quarterly expenses. He worked a day and a half. So most county commissioners around the state work very much part-time. But because of our size, that's simply impossible.
So you don't believe that the growth here should mandate or militate towards any type of change of the type of government that we have?
I think it just makes it more complex and more burdensome on the elected officials, the county commissioners, and the structure that we have. Because I think it can be more efficient. You put more pressure, more demands, it's going to be less efficient.
Okay, thank you.
So I remember with the expenses that I think we call the payables.
Yeah.
And we get on Thursday and we vote on it on Tuesday. And that's actually a check and balance. And I have found several items that hi, elected official, what's this? I will call you back. And 90% of the time, it's like, yep, budgeted for it, here it is. 10% of the time, I had no idea that was being spent. It's going to be fixed next week. So that is on purpose. The commissioners statutorily actually are supposed to approve every paperclip. So the legislature also recognized the fact that that's impossible, especially in a county our size. And so they've made some conditions like our policy, our expenditure policy. Anybody with a single expenditure of $5,000 or more had to come before the board. Well, when you're talking about solid waste, that they would live in front of us. So we were able to pass a policy that agrees with statute that allows solid waste to continue their operation without undue hardship on them coming before the board. So those kinds of efficiencies, and actually many times I've had staff and elected officials and other county employees say that the board that I'm in now has moved the fastest than most other boards have, but we also have additional staff. And Dan said, I used to write my own press releases. Oh my God, don't. I send them to her. And same thing with analysis. I mean, the analysis that I'm like, it'd be really nice to know is this, that, and the other. And Nancy's like, okay, 15 minutes later, and I have this great analysis. So that saves me an incredible amount of time to have these resources in my hand quickly. And then I can work on more things like policy and procedure and stuff like that. So I think we already have gained some efficiencies with our staff. And like I said, I think we can even gain more if we tweak a few things, but one step at a time. I still got a year and a half left, or, if the Lord blesses me, I'll have 3.5 years left, but we'll see.
I have a question.
Tamara, would you like to yield?
Yes, that's fine.
Go ahead.
I didn't hear you, Stanley. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Tamara's yielded her question to you for the moment.
Okay, this is Brian. Sorry. Commissioner Duncan, one of the things I've heard along the way about the option of using a manager is that it would facilitate budgeting activities that or based on what has been represented to me, appear to occupy a fair amount of time on behalf of commissioners throughout the year. As budgets grow, presumably with a growing population, Do you see that as a reasonable argument about a manager providing support in the budgetary area that goes on every year, or is it simply just a matter of you don't need to change anything, you just do what you're doing, which is add more staff to help you analyze the budget and put it together?
I think that's where I land at this point. I have a really good relationship with our auditor, so any questions, I get those answered quickly. And like I said, with our business analyst, I get any analysis done that I want. So for me, that's enough. The budget to me is the number one thing. Okay, it's tied. It's tied with representation. So it's it is part of my number one priority is the budget to make sure that tax dollars are being expended properly and not being wasted. I have people bother me sometimes, not bother me, but complain that I'm bothering them because, well, that was only a $30 stapler. It's like, but how much taxpayer money can we waste? Is $30 okay to waste? $200, $1,000, $1? In my mind, I don't want to waste $1. Now, things happen, mistakes are made, and you can't always, be the most efficient just because of the circumstances that come up. But I think that budgeting being one of my most important priorities, I don't mind spending a lot of time on it because I think that people hate government because they feel like their money is just being wasted. And I don't want to, I want to be able to account for everything. I want to say, you know what, the justice system really needs a new building. They really need new courthouses. So that's my job to be able to articulate what I know from being here every day to the public to say, this is why we need a $20 million bond. And it's because you don't want your loved one, either a victim waiting a year for the perpetrator to be brought to justice or an righteously accused person waiting for a year to get a trial. So for me, roundabout way, budgeting is one of the most important things that I do, and I don't mind spending a lot of time on it. And I think that right now I have enough resources to make good decisions in the budget process.
I'm going to agree with Leslie here, but on a different way. The budget is prepared by the elected officials bringing forth their budget and working with the clerk's office. So the commissioners really don't do anything in the preliminary stages. The other elected officials and departments of the Board of County Commissioners start working on preparing their budgets in probably February, something like that. And the commissioners really get involved when it's time for approval. Then you sit down and see what's everybody asking for. But as far as the creating of the budget, I don't think a city manager or anybody like that is going to make that more efficient unless you want to take that budgeting authority away from the other elected officials. And I would never support that. Our role is to fund the county, and ultimately it comes in front of our role. I'm not a commissioner anymore. Leslie's role is to fund the county, and so that's when she gets her bite at the apple. She can increase their request, she can deny, lower the request, or support the request. So anyway, I don't see where another staff person there is going to facilitate the budgeting process.
And by the way, the $30 stapler was one of those super duper industrial ones that can go through a really big stack of paper. So that one stayed.
Thank you.
Dave, let me say, and this is where I think it's inefficient. I don't care so much about the $30 staple. I'm worrying about the $100,000 lawsuits that we're getting into because of problems. Where other commissioners worried about, I remember one worrying about what kind of guns the sheriff's office are buying. They're the pros. Let them buy the guns. Our job was much bigger than that.
Tamara?
I guess a little clarification on business efficiency versus effective public representation. And while there is obviously a lot of business aspects to our county structure, the ultimate role of government is to represent the people. So, in your opinion, what is the best way to have it? Because they're two different terms, and they absolutely, I think, with what we're dealing with here, should be treated as two different terms. How do we have better efficiency with, and also continue to keep our representation, increase our representation. It's what Bob asked for, to make sure that the will of the people are represented. What will they vote for?
Okay, we're testing. Can anybody hear me back there?
Nope.
Yeah. Okay, there we go.
Technology hates me. It was probably my fault. People in my family will totally understand that. So how do you make that distinction between the two and make sure we have a better, efficiently run government and also keep a properly representative government that's supposed to serve the people?
Right, that's the whole one of the main frustrations I had is you could not, as a commissioner, properly represent the people and be at the places I needed to be out there being touched, spoken to, hearing concerns when I was at times swamped with what I would call minutia. And and we increased efficiencies when I was in. She's talking about this new computer system. She doesn't know what the indigent process or land use process looked like before she came here. We had a stack of paper this tall every week that we were supposed to thumb through and be briefed on. Now it's on a laptop, or it was when I came in. So, yeah. So that's the dilemma that as a county commissioner, I'm going to go back to a city councilman or a school board member. They're out there in theory with the public. If they are being managed by the superintendent of the school district, then it's the challenge for the citizens to get people in there that are going to take a stand instead of being a rubber stamp of a superintendent or a mayor or something like that. Again, it's the amount of time that we spend in topics that are just not efficient use, I believe, of my time when I was in here. But those topics, county government did not move forward or did not exist or did not perform if we didn't sign off on these documents daily or have these hearings that were most of us think about property tax hearings and land use hearings, but the minutia of hearings, the numbers of hearings that they sit, the number of meetings they sit in on a weekly basis is staggering to to facilitate the operations of county government, and that's what I hope we could reduce.
So when I came in, we had an HR meeting every single week, and I said, no, not anymore. So we have it twice a week. The second and the fourth Thursdays of the month is when we have HR meeting. Occasionally we have to have an emergency meeting, but I've asked to have things pushed to status update, pushed to business meetings to consolidate some of these things. And staff had even mentioned at one time just having meetings 2 days a week, just on Tuesdays and Thursdays. That's the only time we have meetings. Then we have Monday, Wednesday, Friday to prepare for the meetings to go out. So I think there are a lot of things that can be done, but you also fight now against, we've always done it this way. So how are we going to change to make this more efficient? So it's just a slow process, and that's okay because government needs to be quick to service, slow for policy. So I'm okay with the pace of government. It does frustrate me sometimes, but I think in general, I think we're doing pretty good. Running your own business, I know that you want things to be responsive, and running your own business, you have the ability to make decisions saying that, okay, this is my priority. However, I'm going to take resources from this and I'm going to fund this because I think that in the long run it's going to happen. And technology is one of those. I don't think government should be on the cutting edge of technology. I think that things need to be tried and true before money is spent on something like that. Whereas a private business might be able to gain efficiencies a lot quicker because they can take the risk of new technology. So I'm just okay with the pace of government the way it is. I don't think, and like I said, I am daily working on different efficiencies because I have my things I want to do, and I think we can always do things better. I think human beings can always do things better, and the day somebody thinks they can't do anything better, then you know.
Sherry? Sherry?
A real simplistic question. Tell me about Monday, from the beginning that you got in the door till the time you left to go home. And then also, Dan, kind of what you can remember of a typical Monday. And I want some of the bad stuff, not just the good stuff.
Well, this past Monday was nice. It was 3 hours on the lake, but of course it was a holiday. Um, I'll give you a busy Monday. How's that? These Mondays aren't always like this, but a busy Monday might look like I will leave my house between 7:30 and 8, and I will usually make at least one, maybe two phone calls touching base with my department heads, or if anybody has left a message over the weekend or something to that effect. And by the way, 4th of July weekend, I did have calls from 4 constituents, and I offered a fifth to talk to them. So that's just how nerdy I am at my job. It's okay. So then I would get here maybe 8:45, in time to set my stuff down, grab my computer if I need it, grab my documents for maybe a 9 o'clock airport meeting. And I already got my agenda for Friday, so I've already done all my pre-work on Friday. So I already know the topics on the airport agenda. So I'm going to go in there and I'm going to understand what we're talking about. I'm going to have my questions ready. And actually, Joan can attest to this because she's in most of those airport meetings. Depending on what's on the list, it's probably a 20 to 30 minute, maybe 45 if we have any presentations. I'll go back upstairs. I'll see if there's any phone calls, signings. We get stuff in our mailbox, so I'll sign some stuff. Typically, then we just have an 11 o'clock status update, which once again, I've already prepared for. So I will just go downstairs here and attend the 11 o'clock meeting. Once again, that can be 15 minutes to an hour and a half, just depending on the topics. I'll go maybe, depending on the weather, take a walk for lunch or just eat at my desk, which is a super bad habit, which I need accountability for. I've got to get away from my desk during lunchtime. So in between, I am doing emails, and I've actually started an app called Toggle, I think it is. And so every minute that I'm at my desk, I track what I'm doing, whether I'm talking to a constituent, whether I'm working on email. And it's super easy. It takes literally 2 seconds just to push the button. Waterways, if you guys knew how many days in the amount of hours I've spent on waterways. But Toggle's telling me all this. So what I'm going to be able to do is say, you know what? This is where I'm spending most of my time, and I don't want to do that. So how can I fix where I'm spending most of my time? And so that I'll, return emails, I'll return phone calls. Mondays can be a little bit more hectic sometimes. So staff will come to me with different issues that may have happened over the weekend or something we need to address for the week. And then typically Monday afternoons are free. If I haven't finished my business meeting prep, then I will go through maybe the payables again, maybe get questions answered for some of these expenditures that I found during my prep time. And I guess that's just a typical day. I try to be in the office 9 to 4. Sometimes it's 9 to 9 or 9 to 10, but typically it's, I just try to do that 9 to 4 thing.
Well, you're testing me here. I would usually be in by 7:38, kind of an early guy. Um, probably get 100 emails a day. Some of them I didn't need to answer. Some of them, were either administrative or staff related, or some of them, and the frustrating ones were ones I couldn't answer because I could only give a suggestion, but I couldn't give direction because where Leslie just talked about having meetings on Tuesdays or only meetings on Mondays and Tuesdays, I think is completely unrealistic because things pop up. You want to slow down the whole operation even more? Say I'm only going to meet Mondays and Tuesdays. And, you know, when we've got decisions that need to be made, but we can't make decisions independently. I don't remember what we did Monday mornings, but we had a regularly scheduled meeting. I remember when I came here, talked about efficiencies, the Board of County Commissioners would meet on Monday afternoon to go over a practice business meeting, which was always scheduled for Tuesday, but they would go over the practice business meeting for the following week. And I scratched my head. Well, if you're going over the practice meeting, you're discussing all the topics, you're basically making a decision now. Why are you having a business meeting in a week? So, but I mean, that's what they always done. So we nuked that proposal or that suggestion. And I think what Leslie calls status update, we actually started what was called the debrief meetings. Yeah, debrief meetings where Todd, Tondi, Jay Nelson, and myself could sit and update each one of us what we had been representing the county at during the previous week to say, hey, here's what I found out at the HARBS meeting, the sewer board. I represented the county at the sewer board. Here's what's going on because the sewer board, we owned part of the HARBS, getting into minutia, but we owned part of it out the airport, near the airport. But I couldn't do anything out there representing the county unless I had authorization from at least one more commissioner. So I would tell them what's going on. They kind of give me some direction. Yeah, Dan, I'm good with that. We'll make a motion right here. You can vote to approve their budget representing the county. That meeting eventually got hijacked because periodically we'd ask department heads to come in and give us an update instead of just giving me an update because, again, I could maybe give them what I thought was my 2 cents. If the solid waste manager would come to me and say, Dan, I want to buy this new machine. And I said, I'm not going to support that. He already knew he had one vote against him. So now he had to get the other 2 votes. So I said, you know, it's a bad bet. But anyway, but they would want to come get in front of the 3 commissioners. So our debrief would usually take up the rest of Monday. I mean, Monday afternoon from 1 to 4, because everybody started to realize they could get their bite at the apple. Then the other elected saw they could get their, right? She's smiling. They got their bite at the apple in front of the commissioners, and we're all together because here we can make a decision. But if we're not together, we're really kind of useless as far as they were concerned. So in between, like I said, the phone calls, the people walking in, the amount of reports they ask you to review. Everybody that appears in front of you, whether it's another government agency or something, or it's a constituency group, they've got a draft of something they want to show you. And, you know, I mean, I just stack them up and try and read as much as I could to honor their wishes and be brief. So when they come in front of us again, it was actually Mondays, though, we would have the fewest scheduled meetings, but it didn't relieve the amount of time that we had work to do. And yet leaving the office to go attend other functions was always tough. Always tough. I don't know if that answers, but it's a challenge to manage the time.
Thank you.
Did you want to say something, Lee? Okay. Kristen, if we can interrupt for just a moment. It's 5 after 7. We have had this issue before. We've had long meetings, and this looks like it's going to run long. Would we like to take a 10-minute break? Paul, real quickly. Looks like we're going to take a 10-minute break. We'll be back at 7:15.
he could walk down the aisle and a computer would fail next to him. So
I shut my husband's computer down every time. He asks me to leave the room because he can't download something. It's awful.
It seems, Nancy, is my mic working now? Okay, we have it. Kristen, did you have any questions?
I actually have one more question for Mr. Green, but okay, Mr. Dan. Okay, can we compromise here? But I guess at this point, I just kind of like to. I'm trying to summarize what I'm hearing, and it seems like the solutions that I'm hearing to efficiency and effectiveness are hire more people, fix ourselves, like through personal effort, fix how we spend our time, use personal relationships to persuade, take the issues to the paper or to court, take someone's salary away, wait 4 years for the public to vote the individual out. I'm not sure how I understand how that's really being responsive to the constituents, but that's not my question. If either of you want to respond to that, I'm happy to. My question is actually the question that I thought someone else was going to ask. That's why I didn't ask it the first time, which is, what was the thought in putting this on the ballot in 2012? Because there wasn't a study commission. It had been 15 years. So I'm curious as to what the thinking was and what you actually hoped the outcome would be.
Well, first off, a lot of those ideas that you read off were Leslie's ideas. I didn't agree with some of those.
I know.
Okay. Well, actually, sitting back watching the commissioners deliberate over the comp plan, whether you agreed with it or not, for 18 months after I worked with one of the brightest boards. I worked with 6 really bright people, and we met sometimes 3 days a week for a couple of years developing a comp plan.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched the board deliberate over it for 18 months. And I thought, my goodness, is this the best we get? Why aren't there more people raising their hand to be commissioner? And that started me thinking. And I started thinking about friends that I know that could be commissioners, and they would never do it.
Yeah.
Because we had made it a job, and it wasn't so much public service. They might be on a city council or a school board, but they didn't want to give up their job, to come do this. And then you'd probably be out of it. It'd be a terrible career move too, because you're probably out of a job in 2 or 4 years. There was a study commission though in 2005, and that's what I'm surprised that
that was for salaries. I thought only salary considerations.
No, there was also talk about restructuring county government. I believe with wasn't that with John Hippler, and
The report that I've seen was a commission to study compensation, and they, at the end, made an unrelated recommendation concerning the form of government.
Thank you. So I saw that, and then as I sat here for the first 2 years of being elected, and I watched some of the frustration of the dysfunctionality of moving things along. That's what, in talking with the other commissioners, Tonti and Nelson, we agreed to put something on the ballot. There was discussion on how aggressive to be as far as unelecting people, and I'm sure that helped in sealing its fate. But I also remember going and talking to Tom Taggart about his experience of being that administrator. And actually, they've accomplished, the board has essentially accomplished half of what I proposed. They've added staff, they've added professionalism, they've added money. Okay. It's what Ada County has done. You can go, if you see what Troy Tymason or Brett Boyer gets paid, or Leon, I forget his last name, after him, they're all well into 6 figures as the city administrators there, I've got to believe. You have part of the solution already in some of the staff that's been put on. I think, I hate to say you've done it more, not you, it's been done more expensively than or at a higher cost. So now how can we free up so that commissioners can, I'd like to think, focus more on policy, which is when they stand up there running, they're talking about what they're going to do with your taxes and what are you going to do with land use and things like that. And that becomes a much smaller percentage of your time is dealing with those issues than when you start getting into doing
doing what Leslie has to do on a daily basis right now. Does that help? Well,
Yes. So basically, it was yourself and one other commissioner, or did all three commissioners decide to put it on
all
the
three
ballot?
commissioners agreed to put it on the ballot, and essentially at the baseline, you're letting the citizens vote.
And
I
let
mean,
the
it
voters.
can't be any better, in my opinion.
Right.
It can't be any better now. If they vote no, they vote no.
Mhm.
You know, I was disappointed, but anyway.
Was there any action toward explaining it to the voters? Because through the course of just the few meetings that I've attended here, I have learned a lot about county government that I did not know. I truly thought the county commissioners were the end all be all and could actually accomplish things more directly. I didn't realize that all those row officials had their own little offices, and they could work together, or they could decide not to. Again, checks and balances. I'm not saying whether that's good or bad. I think what is important is that we understand how it works.
What I found, and this is what have found with running my own campaigns and doing this, and maybe Leslie, people say they're going to help you, and you look behind, and there's nobody behind you when you put your face out there. It was very well received in the business community. Chambers of Commerce supported it, and I'm going to say they got it because they were business leaders. They understood the frustration of, and again, I'm talking about the administrative side of county government.
Right.
It's not the policy
Absolutely.
side. And they got it. But when I would go out and talk to citizens, and there were panels, forum panels, and on the radio, I'd go out and talk to citizens, and they would say, well, why can't you guys just get along? And I'm going, you need to come to a meeting or two. Look at her laughing or smiling here. She's paying, little rosy. It's not always rosy. I mean, it's can be real.
Oh, no. Anybody who's watched the last 2.5 years knows it's not right.
Yeah, yeah, she knows. But even with the other electeds, it's frustrating, and so. But I didn't have. I was kind of the guy out front, and there wasn't a big campaign behind me, and I don't know, went down with 30-some% of the vote, which is pretty bad.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the way it is. But you know, I'm proud because the citizens got a bite at the apple.
Thank you.
So I think for me, with the whole efficiency thing, when you are a business person, we ran our own business for 14 years. You have to be on top of the market. You have to be aware of everything that is going to affect your bottom line. In government, it's not like that. You're not concerned about profit because legally we cannot make a profit. So to me, it's a different animal. Yeah, there's always efficiencies to be made, but I don't look at it like a business. I don't look at it like we're trying to make money or provide jobs. I look at it like we've got mandated services that we have to provide, so let's focus on those. And then let's focus on the type of service people demand. Motor vehicle licensing. If you want to wait 45 days to get your plates, then we don't have to raise taxes. We don't have to hire somebody else. But if you want same day service, then we are going to have to hire 2 more full-time people, which increases taxes. So to me, it's a service. And no, I'll stop that thought because that's ornery. It just depends on what the people want. For me, justice is everything. I don't want people waiting in jail 3, 6, 9 months to get their hearing, to get their time, before a judge. I think that's unreasonable, and I think that is another taxpayer expense. And when you look at these people, they lose everything. Okay, so they might have had a job, a house, a relationship, but once they're arrested, if they're not processed quick enough, if they're not through the system, then they could lose that job, that house, that relationship. And now they're even going to be more of a burden going forward. So to me, and of course I spent 10 years in law enforcement, so of course I have a bit of a bias, I suppose. But again, that goes back to our quality of life. If we have a strong justice system, then our quality of life, I think, is going to be a little bit more protected. And having these other elected officials, and you know what? I actually use some of the other elected officials as if they were another commissioner. Hey, what about this idea? What do you think about this? And so that's been really helpful because a couple of them like, don't even bring that up. Oh, okay, thanks. No problem. And then other ones like, yeah, you know what? If you brought that up, I would support you on that. So I think there's just ways to do it, but it's not a business to me. and I have run my own business, and I've also been in government. So it's a bit of a different animal, and I just want to know what statute is. I just want to know how to comply with statute, how to provide the service that we need to provide at the lowest cost possible.
Everybody stands up and says they're going to cut costs, lower this, lower that, or you're not going to get elected. We kid, you know. And I like to think I brought my skill set to the job. I mean, when I came in, we lowered our insurance premiums on our self-funded policy because most of the elected officials didn't understand self-funding. $400,000 a year. We were basically not self-insured, and it's something that I understood, and I did, and then that was able to carry forward from years going on, or promoting changing at will. And these were things I didn't know anything about when I came in, but it was my skill set that helped me do these things and increase efficiencies. You know, there's all kinds of things we can pick at, but I just wish we had more. Boy, I'll just stop there.
Okay.
Question. Is that Brian again? Yeah. Brian, can we get to you after a couple more people? Absolutely. Joe, your turn.
So there seems to be kind of an overall theme in listening to testimony about the struggle with the administrative function versus the policy making side. And although I realize government is much different than running a corporation, corporations have done a lot of time and motion studies, and they've done a lot of studies regarding delegating and those kinds of things. And I was wondering if you could speak to um, perhaps how it might be helpful to look at delegating more of those administrative responsibilities to your department heads. And Dan, when you spoke to employee salaries and compensation, to me that's the role of HR and should not be done by all of the other folks in there. So they bring a study to the BOCC. So anyway, that's one thing I'd like to get your opinion on.
So HR does the study and then they come and make recommendations, but state law require that the commissioners set the salaries. So, right. I have done some of that delegation. So HR would bring even simple things like in the attorney's office, if there was an AT4 opening, and that's a class of attorney, but yet no AT4s are applying, so only the skill level of AT2 is applying. Then they would have to come before us and say, "Can we hire an AT2? We're not getting any applications for an AT4." I said, "Don't come to us for that." And I had agreement. You know, I don't do anything on my own. I say I, but it's not true. Us, we. So now HR takes care of that. So their HR has been given more responsibility, more authority in things that don't directly affect the salaries. And then they also have permission to say, okay, if this AT2, or I should say if an AT3 can now graduate to an AT4 and then the AT2 can move to the 3, then that can also happen too, because those positions still exist. They were just changed for the meantime. And I guess I don't need to get in the weeds about that. But to say that I have been doing that, and especially I used to do a lot in the beginning, and now I do delegate much more. And I think that has helped me get some of my projects done because there were letters I would write and things, and now I don't. I'm like, hey, can you write that letter? Yeah, absolutely. I have it done for today. So that's been good. And my particular department heads are always trying to help me. You know, they'll bring me an issue. Okay, what do you need from me? Well, I need a letter written to so and so. And I said, okay, well, when's the letter going to be on my desk? And they'll write it for me, and I'll review it, make changes, and then sign it and move on. So I'm already always looking at those kinds of things, and it's just you can't delegate what's in statute. So you have to kind of be careful of those things.
I think too, Leslie and I, you tend to find people you have a lot of confidence in. I had department heads that, yeah, they were golden. I mean, they were just simply awesome. and you spend 90% of your time with the 10% that you have problems with. But here's what I'm not sure when HR right now works under the prosecutor's office. Well, when I was a commissioner, they worked under the Board of County Commissioners. And why did it change? Because the other elected officials didn't think that the HR department was being objective because they worked for the Board of County Commissioners. So they kind of got together and believed that, well, maybe the prosecutor, they kind of trusted Barry that he would be objective. This is the kind of frustrating, and I don't know if it changed in your term or if they moved to the HR department. Yeah, but moved them. They're in the prosecutor's office now, right? Yeah, never worked for the prosecutor. They reported to the BOCC. It was so anyway, that's kind of she gets kind of down in some of the I call it the minutia when she's talking. I'm saying there's a perfect example of electeds. Well, we don't really like the reports HR is giving us on pay scale stuff because they work for the commissioners and you've told them, what they should be saying. So we're going to move them. We want to move them elsewhere. So to build harmony with the other electeds, okay, who would we think would be the most objective? And Barry McHugh was, I don't know about voted most objective, but most honest. I'm not sure. Anyway, that's kind of the frustration I have in the operations.
See, and I would look at that like, ooh, one more thing off our plates. They no longer report to us. So to me, that's a win-win. And the commissioners do benefit a lot from the Dan, Todd, J board. I absolutely, because I know some of the changes that they made, and I really appreciate coming in after that. But things like that, OEM Office of Emergency Management used to be under the Board of Commissioners. They moved to the sheriffs. So those are also things that can take stress off the commissioners, because we have right now 17 departments under 14 department heads under the Board of Commissioners. So there are some things that we can continue to do.
So one follow-up question, has there ever been consideration to bring a consultant in to study efficiencies of staffing and organization of those departments reporting to BOCC?
I actually had a tremendous amount. One of our best hires, and she's no longer here. I had Sky Reynolds, HR director, had a tremendous amount. They would go through and they would do an analysis for us, and I had a tremendous amount of respect and confidence in reporting that she gave. But no, I haven't. Didn't farm it out, so to speak.
So our HR department still can do that. We call it a desk audit, and we have ordered them in different departments, but not necessarily as a whole. So I don't know if you want to clarify a little bit what exactly that would look like.
Well, I was just thinking in terms of trying to find a way within our current structure of government to find more efficiencies in staffing and delegation of responsibilities, et cetera.
So I would say desk audit, and we do order those occasionally.
Kurt? So, Dan, in the 2012 ballot proposition, there was this proposal that it would save money. And part of the proposal also was to de-elect most of the elected positions, except for the sheriff and prosecutor, if I recall correctly. In shifting an elected position, and this is coming from conversation that we had with Steve Matheson last week, in changing an elected position to a hired position, it seems to me that in order to get competitive, high quality, national search level expertise, which has been touted as one of the values of doing that, we'd also have to pay them a lot more. I didn't see any line item in the proposal for the ballot initiative that talked about how much more we'd have to pay to get this high caliber talent into these positions. Did that topic ever come up?
I think it did come up. I don't know why it would be in the ballot initiative, but I agree that most of the other electeds should be paid more, but they shouldn't be paid more if they're electeds, because at the baseline, if you're elected, okay, so that's
public versus a job.
Yeah. So I do believe when I was commissioner, and most of us were making, all the electeds were making it right about $70,000 for the responsibility they had. Barry McHugh made, I think, I remember he was making $99,000, I think, when I left, or something like that. That they were all overpaid based on on the responsibility they had. But as elected officials, that was my personal belief that that was inappropriate. And I don't think just giving, also in the ballot initiative on my presentation, I proposed cutting the commissioner's pay in half because they would be relieved with hiring an administrator of much of their responsibility too. But I think there were eventually going to be costs, whether if you went to how, staffing of what we're going to pay administrator, at that time, $150,000 a year. But part of, as Bruce brought forward, I remember at my first budget hearing, I made a motion the night of the final adoption of the budget that we just cut the budget 1%. Because statistically at that time, the county returned $2.2 million every year we didn't spend that we budgeted for. Maybe still going on today. It was amazing how much we budgeted for. We collected taxes from the citizens, because that's what we do. We budget, we collect the money. It's the way government works. It's opposite of what the private sector does, who buys things and tries to sell them and make money. We just snap our fingers and decide how much we're going to tax you. We would return money every year to the budget. So I proposed a 1% reduction that first year, and the other commissioners just flat, because I knew we had it. I knew we had it. And I didn't get a second vote, unfortunately. So that's why I remember now we're at 2%. I thought that was a very believable, attainable goal, because historically, how much money came back each year and went back into the county coffers, eventually building up a fund balance of millions and millions of dollars.
Yes, thank you. And do you have any opinion if our study commission was to recommend changing any of the elected positions to appointments or hired positions, do you agree that that would probably cost us more to get the level of talent that has been proposed we need?
Definitely. And being in this job and doing the amount of work I'm doing, I would say that the actual county manager would need staff as well. And so not only would you need to pay market rate for the assessor and the clerk and any of the officers or the elected officials that they chose to appoint. And I have seen figures, because there was some analysis done, from $300,000 to $500,000 more each year in that.
For a county manager?
Yes, to go to the five part-time commissioners, county manager, and hire the rest of them, it was going to be $300,000 to $500,000 over. But I think if you guys have the finance director come, she'll give you details.
She's on our list. Yeah.
But over the last couple of years, we've added 3 staff since I've been here, directly reporting to BOCC to help. I'm not sure that Leslie's figure would be. We've already spent $250,000 probably in those 3 people. I mean, they're all high, top-notch people, paid well here at the county.
Sure.
So,
thank you,
Bruce.
For just about all of the speakers before the commission, they talk about efficiency, and tonight is no exception. And I'm just curious, even in the 97 report, no one could ever seem to quantify this. And, in business, usually we try to quantify the problem so that we know, well, does the cost, is it below the benefit? And I'm just curious if anyone here tonight can quantify this inefficiency problem under the current form of government, and just some of the problems that each of you were talking about tonight, and then how between Dan's tenure and Leslie's, there's more administrative staff to help out. Were these issues that only a new form of government could fix, or is it really just a matter of additional staffing to help people, do their job better?
Bruce, I think that's a great question. And I remember when I came on board, and of course, Jay was also a real blessing to the county at that time. We found how many people we had open positions that we were budgeting for every year and not filling. And remember, we were in a recessionary time. 2011, 2012, we had positions in the planning department where we can't get permits out today. We had positions that were never being filled, and we had no trouble getting permits out. So you talk about inefficiencies, looking at how we did, so we eliminated those positions, yet we were taxing the citizens for them every year. But how to run, when you talk about inefficiencies, I don't know that I would ever expect us to go in and analyze how the clerk, or the assessor oversees drivers' registration. I think that would really be getting down there in the weeds. I mean, I like to think about bigger dollar items and bringing in people that have an expertise. Like I said, the self-funded policy, our benefits package. Our benefits package is, I proposed something. It's funny. I was just talking to Nancy today, and she goes, we would have done, Dan, what you suggested. She'd be so far ahead, she's over there bobbing her head now. But yeah, PTO. But because I wanted to remove 2 days of pay or 2 days of vacation pay, people were against it. They'd be tens of thousands of dollars ahead today.
Yeah, but is that something that would have required a change in government for that to happen? Who would have made that decision? Would the BOCC under 5 members with a county manager say, no, we're not going to do that?
I'm going to suggest that we, as a generalization, we get people with different levels of experience or expertise to be the elected officials. But they don't necessarily come in with the level of business experience that they all claim to have, but they all say they're businessmen or women, in coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched it. I mean, I can talk with other people that were in county government, and it took me a couple of years to say, well, why are we doing that? And it was with somebody high up, let's say, maybe in the finance department. And they'd say, and I go, well, what? And it was just, it caught, without being too specific, it surprised me how sometimes the thinking was not very deep. It was just because the way they've always done it. And they had never come from that private arena where you had to be more creative, more aggressive. And believe me, when I proposed some things that were aggressive, boy, you get a lot of pushback around here. Change is not good. Change, status quo is good. I mean, it's tough to push that through, and it's tough even with the other elected officials.
So would a county manager change that?
A county manager would bring, in my mind, with the right person, brings a level of expertise on how to, probably with some kind of degree in advanced degree in public administration, things like that, how to streamline the operation, as Joan's talking about, in ways that the county administration that we now have with 3 commissioners, now albeit they've added definitely some expertise at certain levels that weren't there when I was there, would help streamline some operations. If you look back over the last 20 years at the biographies or the resumes of people that have been county commissioner, it's a variety of levels of expertise.
Yeah, I guess, the problem is that if they're not that good at the county commissioner level, how are they going to be good enough to hire the right person?
You know what? Great question. I don't have.
I mean,
but you know what?
It's like the balloon. You squeeze on one end and it comes out over here. You have to have good people all around, and I keep asking myself, what is so wrong with our current form of government, so I can understand the problem. And and a lot of people use businesses as an example of never run my business this way. Well, I would never change my business unless you could quantify my problem and then quantify the solution. And so I can't seem to quantify our problem. I can assign a value to the voter who wants to be able to. I know there's a value there for the person who wants to vote for their elected officials. So we should be able to quantify what what the inefficiencies are, quantify what we're going to gain, and also look at what is the value to the voters in this county to be able to elect their own, officials in these different parts of the government. And no one seems to be looking at it this way. We're just saying there's a problem and we need to change it.
Well, I'm going to disagree that some people are sitting in here on a daily basis doing it, but without you attending meetings for weeks on end and seeing it as a private business owner, you would be frustrated.
Well, that's why I'm not in government in that sense. But one of the things too with our government, and originally when it was designed in this country, the Senate was a body that was designed to slow down the legislative process. It was actually meant to be inefficient. And so sometimes I keep wondering if this form of government, that inefficiency that we're talking about, is the exact feature of it, that it's meant to be that way.
You're addressing the legislative process, which is also I would consider to be the policy side, not the administrative side of what I'm trying to address. And it is a tough sell. I mean, I tried to sell it. It's a tough sell because if you aren't in here or you haven't led this kind of an organization or an organization as a decision maker at the top, it's tough to understand why can't you just all get along? And it's tough. And I don't know how else until you sit here and watch what goes on. And it always depends on who's sitting in office at that time. There's nothing to talk about. That's something. That's the beauty. We get to make those changes. So that's always the variable.
Yeah, well, I can appreciate that, and even in the military, I saw the inefficiencies, and it's plain as day. But that doesn't necessarily mean that our military is bad and not capable of doing its mission.
So just listening to Dan speak, just a couple things came to my mind. Of the people, for the people, by the people. So I don't want a government full of experts telling me how to live my life or how to run. Guys, please. So I look at it a little bit differently. And our business was much, much smaller than Dan's, and he had way more reason to run his business the way we did. We had, very little employees that we had to support, and Dan had more, obviously. So, and me coming from government, I grew up as a kid in government, right? Started in law enforcement at 21, and so I see kind of the difference, and I want somebody in this position that may not have government experience, may not have business experience, but somebody who can learn quickly, work hard, have the critical thinking skills to make good decisions, and most of all, have integrity. And that's huge and important. So it does have more to do with the people in the office than it does the form, the form that the government takes. And so I guess there's somewhere else I was going. It's been a long day. I'm hitting 12 hours now.
I agree completely with Leslie. I mean, if you have excellent department heads, and I was proud to say when by the time I left, we had 5 or 6 new department heads from when I hit. I am comfortable the county was running more efficiently than when I left, and those were just department heads that reported to the BOCC. But we brought in people with a different level of expertise. It is a tough nut to crack. Integrity is always number one with me. But what if you bring in people that have, I love it, that have integrity, have morality, but they don't have maybe the experience of some of the business decisions, financial decisions we have to make that you have now. They have some staff that we didn't have. And so they've taken a bite of this apple. There's no doubt to educate them. I mean, I saw commissioners, I saw people that worked here a while that they couldn't read a financial statement. They couldn't read the balance sheet. And and yet you're putting them on top and making the administrative decisions to run this big operation. That's a bad couple. I'm sorry. From where I sit, those are our dollars. And I was sitting there trying to maximize our return, or not our return, but our use of our dollars more efficiently. That's a skill set that I was able to bring. And I'm not running for office, so don't worry about it right now. I did my time.
But speaking of running for office, I never told anybody I wouldn't raise their taxes because I knew better. I might be a conservative, but I'm a pragmatist. And I never told anybody that. But I told them that I would darn well give them the best service possible at the lowest cost possible. So just wanted to talk.
So Dave, you gonna get back to me here?
Brian, go ahead.
I'm not cutting anybody off, am I?
No, go ahead, Brian.
So what I've heard from both of you is in different ways. One, there was a problem with a while back, and the commissioners put forward a proposal to try to fix it the way they, at the time, saw they as an option for doing so, but it was voted down. Since that time, though, and more in Commissioner Duncan's tenure, maybe it has been underway, but you've found ways to trim the sails, adjust the sails so that the ship can sail on a relatively straight course, and you've improved upon things from where they were at when that last ballot initiative was put forward. And yeah, it sounds like you're acknowledging some of that and saying, yeah, they've improved that. Some of the things that led you three as commissioners at the time to put this forward as a recommended ballot initiative, they've come at it a different way and seem to have made things work. Is that accurate? They've added staff. They've done certain things to achieve efficiencies and things have gotten better than where they were at when you were serving. Is that generally accurate?
Yeah, I'd like to think so. I haven't worked with some of the new staff, but they brought a level I've seen reporting that comes out of staff that was not available when I was a commissioner unless I did it myself, if I could do it. So, but they're paying a price for that too.
Right. And I guess,
The form of adding new staff, is that what you mean?
yeah, he's saying, shaking his head, yes. So,
Okay, so let me follow up though. I mean, what is it now that caused, I guess, 2 out of 3 commissioners to recommend the study commission? I mean, I'm going back to an earlier question, fellas. What's the problem here? I mean, it sounds like you have the latitude you need to adjust the sails and make the ship, navigate somewhat steady course. What is it? What is the problem?
can you?
Commissioners say, we want the study commission.
I think that's a great question.
Maybe I'll just have to wait to ask them, but I'm curious. It sounds like you have the tools to make the government work.
Yes, and next week you can ask that question.
I mean, I'd be interested in your thoughts on it because you're telling me to make it work the way it is. You don't have to go changing anything.
I feel like I have been making it work the way it is. It works for me. So I feel like my job is to go to meetings. It is to make decisions. I rarely tell people I'm a commissioner. They say, what do you do for the county? I say, I make decisions. Because that's what I do. That's kind of what I was hired to do, make decisions in the best interest of the taxpayers, and try to operate the government, as efficiently as possible. And like I said, I'm always working to make things better. And I really believe that Dan's board left the county better than when they started. And that's my goal too, is to leave the county better. And I have been making, little changes here and there. I can't speak for anybody else. It works for me. I won't. Dan spoke to trust, and that is a huge part of it. I have department heads that I trust. If they say they need something, I know they need it. I have other ones who say they need it, and I will do research to make sure that they it's truly what they need. And I think that is what becomes inefficient for me, is the trust factor. And I don't know how to fix that except to continue to build those relationships so I can build that trust. And frankly, sometime, somewhere, some department heads may need to move on. They may have finished their contribution to the county. And, I'm always willing to look at that. But right now, that's all I can do is try to build relationships with these people to make sure that I can trust their needs, because I feel like that's my goal. Not my goal. That's one of my responsibilities, is to get people the resources they need to serve the public.
one thing I just want to add, you get your money's worth with Leslie. She works hard. I used to think I worked hard, but she still can't get everything done that she's tasked to do. There's no way. I don't have to be there. I know it. It's simply impossible. So are we able to potentially relieve some of that responsibility or distribute that responsibility as maybe if you consider 5 people so that she can do those jobs or tasks either better or with more research than she can now. And I'm speaking for her, but I just know she can't. You can't do it all. You can't do what people expect you to do. And I guess having been there to do the deep dives in different things, I found myself focusing on certain things that interested me, but that didn't mean I was well versed on everything that came in front of me. That's the big change.
Once again, I feel like I get enough information. It is true that I will get a packet of 600 pages and I will go in and I will read to the level that I need to make that decision. Contracts are a good example. We have, let's say it's one that has to do with the assessor. So the assessor's read the contract, the legal has read the contract. I don't need to read that contract, right? I need to know what legal says about it. And my next proposal is to get a contract cover sheet. So it gives us the terms right up front, because that's what I read the contract for. I read it for dollars and terms. I don't read every nook and cranny because that's what legal's for. So there are ways that I can't do it all. And that's where I go back to the trust factor. If I could trust more, I could do less. I was going somewhere. So I also have certain meetings that happen every week that I know exactly the information to pull out. So I have it. And then if I can go back and do more, then I can go back and read more. But yeah, I feel like it's working for me. I don't ever feel like I go into a meeting that I'm not prepared for, that I needed more information. If I did, I would have already asked the questions. Something's come up in the meetings and you're like, whoa, didn't see that coming. We're going to have to put this decision off because I need more information. And I have done that several times in the last 2.5 years. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about that.
Well, I want to thank you for your remarks this evening because I really found what both of you had to say very informative. I'm still wondering what the problem is, and I guess you two have some ideas, but I appreciate you sharing and being forthright with us in your discussion. It really is meaningful for us to hear this. Thank you.
Phil, did you have any questions? I'm sorry. Unmute here. Phil, did you have any questions?
I know it's really like, and I apologize, but I would like to just ask one thing. We have 2 commissioners as far as they're all good people. I don't know anything ill about any of them, and that includes the 6 elected officers. But we have $100+ million budget. And that budget and everything it is spent on, which isn't the efficiency. I think we're confusing efficiency with effectiveness. Is that $100 million being spent in the most effective manner? And it is addressing the needs of the people. And that's hard to assess. But I know a few years ago, we had 2 commissioners who passed the resolution to limit a building code, which is all been turned down by the voters. And it's true enough to make those types of decisions. And that's one of the questions I have, really. Should we have a little more options for people to go to rather than just 2 every time? Should it be 3, should it be 4? I don't know. But I think we can look at representation and effectiveness, not just dwell on efficiency. And, if you want to comment, that's fine, but I know it's late. If you'd rather just go home, that's okay too.
I don't think any of us have, either one of us, I apologize, have an answer for that.
Dave, do you have any questions?
I do, but it's about the budget process in a way, and I'm not going to get into efficiencies and effectiveness but I'll use the sheriff as an example. The sheriff came and spoke to the county commissioners and asked for his budget, and the numbers were $5 million up or something in that neighborhood, and he justified why he believed that that was the right amount. We voted for the sheriff, or at least some of us voted for the sheriff, and he got elected under a certain platform to do certain things. To do those certain things, I'm assuming the budget supported the sheriff's needs. I don't know for a fact, so I didn't go over every line. So my question really is, it seems like this is the one thing I can't figure out is you have road officials who are being elected and accountable to us, but not in control of the money they need potentially to get their jobs done. Steve, last week, I think, talked about a computer upgrade that he hopes to be able to do over a period of time, but that's going to be funded through you, county commissioners. So my question is do we need to look at allowing the row officials to go to the public and justify their increases in spending that could mean increases in taxes versus putting the responsibility on the county commissioners to raise taxes? And if you don't give him what he needs, he may not be able to provide the services he wants to, and he'll look to say the county commissioners won't fund my needs. So it seems like an inconsistency of how you deal with things.
David, every sheriff, the sheriffs I have served under or served with, that's exactly what they did. And they, of course, the commissioners wouldn't give me this. Every elected official, you guys aren't getting raises because the commissioners aren't giving us the money we need for your raises. That's like, it's a guarantee. The commissioner's role is to fund operations and to tax the citizens. None of the other elected officials tax the citizens. So believe me, you want to know who's up there with a target on them? Leslie, Bill, and Chris. It was Dan, Todd, and Jay. I mean, the taxes, the citizens didn't. I'm sorry. It's naive to think the citizens looked to the assessor that he wanted to raise taxes or the sheriff.
Right.
Yeah, that's very naive. It's the commissioners that get harpooned, and they have the authority to do that. That's their statutory responsibility, is to fund the operations. I mean, you're running $100 million budget. I don't know right now. Yeah, let's go. Let the electeds have what they want and see what your budget goes to then. What they come in with and ask to start with.
It's unclear. It was somewhere around $9 million over our taxing authority. So the way I look at it is you have needs. You cannot do your job unless you have this. And you have things that would make your job better. And then you have flat out wants. So it's a 3-tiered system for me. And I try to work with each elected official to say, what's your needs? Because I'm going to go after those first. And then what's your, what would make things better? And then what's your wants? And I do want to know all 3 of those, because if I can eventually afford to fund a want that is going to serve the citizens, then I need to know those things. Haven't found one yet. So those are the things that I look for working with the elected officials. Is like, tell me what you need. And I've already sat down with a couple groups and said, okay, here's the list of everything you want. What can you give up? Because I know you need this body. I know you need this person. And so what can you give up? And I was just handed a paper today. Somebody gave up $700,000 of different things because they need the people. They need more people. More money is not going to help these people because they're worked to the bone. Even the overtime, they cannot get their job done. So I look at it like that. And like I said, I want the elected officials to come with their wants, because you never know when you're going to get that. We actually have a want this year, and I'm not going to dime anybody out for it. This one elected official came with a want, and we looked at it and thought, if we do this countywide, that will be an efficiency. That will save potentially up to a person in FTE if we do that countywide. So it is important to have those 3 levels and priorities. But right now, the justice system needs bodies, and that's kind of my focus. So I go to people and I say, look, you've got $40,000 in your travel budget, but you're telling me you need this full-time, this part-time person to go to full-time. Which do you need more? I'll cut all my travel. Okay, good. You got your, well, I will advocate for that person, that position. So it's, obviously I've never been in life where I've had to run $100 million budget, but I break it down piece by piece and elected official, department head. And that's how I look at it. And I just go, one by one, and I try to get everybody's, I try not to cut anything the first time. I try to listen to everybody's reasoning behind it. And I'm telling you what, people can make the best argument for gum. I mean, we need $100,000 in gum, and this is why. Did you ever see the show MacGyver? I mean, they can really, really knock your socks off. But my position is I have to look from up here at all the needs, because if the assessor doesn't do their job, then we can't collect the right amount of taxes. And if the clerk doesn't issue the warrants and the treasurer doesn't sign these things, then the employees don't get paid. So we all work together, and I'm trying to get us to work better together to understand that, yeah, this is your department and your needs, but you're all connected. And if I short these people to fill your needs are not going to get filled, because you work with these people and you work with those people, and now you're going to have to wait days or weeks if I can't properly fund everybody to a certain level. And once again, I go back to what level of service. So if we cannot fund the sheriff to the point where he wants to be funded, then what does that mean for level of service? And that's a discussion that I like to have. Right now, I'm fighting like crazy for, we call them ECOs, but they're communications officer, 911 operators. I'm really trying to dig hard, find money in the budget to get those positions funded, because that is a high stress. I did that for a while. High stress environment. I can't have these people working overtime and get burnt out. And I do adopt all 870 employees like my own, because I care about each and every one of them. I don't get along with all of them. I just care about them. So I take it personally to make sure that these people are being taken care of, and I don't want to burn people out. So once again, I didn't tell people I wasn't going to raise their taxes. I'm advocating for a huge amount of money to give raises to everybody this year, because we're not keeping people. It's just the market is so crazy, we're not keeping people. So I try to be practical about it, and I'm too long-winded, so.
Thank you.
Dan, anything to add? Okay. Bob? Brian?
Nothing, Your Honor. I mean, nothing, thank you.
Your
Just comes out all the time.
Habit, yes. Tamara?
Just kind of I guess I would like your opinion. Do you feel that the other 6 elected positions should stay as elected, or is there a benefit to having them be appointed?
I think between what would be the most efficient versus what is the politically doable, there's two different answers. I think to have, a couple of them appointed is appropriate, because you can find people with the best skill set. And well, see,
Guys, please.
I had one elected official in particular that was not up to the job, but that elected official was elected, and the citizens and the county operations, I think, suffered under their tenure. But not all of them. No way. I mean, it's just you can't change that much. My goal is to get the best people we can to help manage the operations of the county. It's very different from running the policy position of the county. And when I'm going to throw I'm good friends with Steve Matheson, and we go to lunch, and I wish I could have served with him as a commissioner. I said, Steve, why don't you run for commissioner? He goes, Dan, I'd never do what you do. Yeah. But yet he wants to interject in other things that the commissioners do.
from the sideline. And I kid him about it, you know. So I probably just ended my lunches with Steve Matheson. But anyway.
So I think we need to elect the assessor because the commissioners sit over Board of Equalization, and I think that's a check and balance there. Sheriff is an obvious thing. I'm not going to waste time on that. I think we need to elect the clerk because they're over elections, and I don't want 5 part-time commissioners having any influence over elections. Prosecutor, again, I'm not going to waste my time. The coroner is the only one who can arrest the sheriff. I want to elect a coroner, and then the treasurer. I mean, I welcome the checks and balances and the pushback from the treasurer. And folks, we got a good one. And if anybody wants to talk him into running again, that would be a really good thing. So I can't find a reason to not elect. And it is frustrating when you have these pushbacks. I mean, I've gotten yelled at, like raised voice in elected officials meeting, and I just have to take myself out of it. I'm like, okay, that's on you, buddy. You're having a bad day. So it's the nature, though. It's the nature, and I signed up for the battle, I guess, is what it is.
Just, it seems to be that how you as an individual perceive the position then correlates to what you perceive to be the inefficiencies. So I'm just trying to have clarification here that when you served, that there seemed to be a large lack of administrative help. And so that didn't allow you to do things that you thought you could or should be able to do outside of the office, the 4 walls of the office. Is that correct?
I think a little bit. I mean, I tried not to run. I never tried to run other elected officials' department or their offices.
No.
Okay, but the more time that I was personally spent in what I would consider to be administrative tasks took me away from working with constituents and addressing much broader policy issues that were sometimes very complex.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't talking actually about the other elected officials. And then what I'm hearing from Commissioner Duncan is that you have done things to increase efficiency and actually kind of take away from administrative. But I'm seeing in conversations that there's a lot of administrative stuff that happens that has to happen with the BOCC. It can't be removed from them. So,
And I think just with the population growth we have, I can tell you they have to have more indigent cases in front of them on a weekly. We don't have as many now. Okay, so
State law change.
oh, state law. Okay, so more people, more things coming. You know, just more transactions. You know, it's that got to be that simple. But
was that I mean, am I hearing that correctly? I'm just trying to understand because I think Bruce mentioned it earlier about the business. People came and think this is a business. It has to be streamlined, that we need to have this all done. This will increase efficiency. But what was alluded to earlier is that a business has profit sharing and has a profit, but government's different. So I know there's aspects of both, and both have to be incorporated and work together. But it seems to be, and it has happened in multiple meetings, that the administrative side seems or is being talked about to be an overwhelming burden that is then inhibiting the commissioners from actually performing to their ability that they should be doing on the legislative side. But Commissioner Duncan is saying that's not the case. And so
I think when people are elected for county commissioner, they are elected under the premise that we're going to be addressing 3-4 things or something, and that tend to be very global and encompassing land use issues or something like that. I mean, the issues that are so complex that are battling the county right now. But when you get in and you become a commissioner, you just find that there's so much more.
Oh, sure.
So much more. And I wish everybody could have a chance to shadow Leslie for a week. Okay, a day. Anyway, and just see the well, when are you going to talk about, let's see, when are we going to talk about this or this that, we think we should be talking about? And it's system, I don't want to say isn't broken, but it can be better. And we can get people, I mean, sitting around this table, there's some very bright people. I can sense that. And I'd be curious to see how many would run for county commissioner. Now, I would like to.
After this, probably nobody.
Yeah, but I mean, the point is that the skill sets that could be here, but they wouldn't do it. And that frustrated me, is that people in the community, they won't do it. And yet we really could use their services. And part of it is because they already have jobs or careers and they can't make that transition. But they might serve on a city council or a school board.
I think it's very hard, and it is, and a lot of people don't. One of the first two commissioners talked about that he would never run for politics again, or or advise that. I don't remember. Do you remember who that was in the first one? The first of the two, that the amount of backlash that happens was just enough to say no. And so some people have that, but I think if you have the passion, if you have the ability, that maybe they just need a little urging. I don't know. I mean, it is interesting. We want to have the best people we possibly can get, and I think having. Well, I'll just stop there because it's not about my opinion. But go ahead, Leslie.
So I just want to, and I think I've thanked Dan for this before, but one of the best compliments he ever gave me was he said, out of all the candidates, I knew more about what the job of commissioner was than anybody else. And that was on purpose. I served on a county board and I learned. I was upstairs. I was on the third floor weekly during our time of service. And I asked a bunch of questions and I attended probably at least 100 meetings before I got elected. I mean, I was there quite a bit, read minutes and all that. So I think that's probably maybe part of the reason why I like it so much, because I knew what I was getting into and I knew not to take things personally. And I'm a mom, so I'm used to getting backlash when I tell people no. And so it is perception. It really is perception. And the way I perceive this job, I'm okay with it. I like it. I think that my life experience and my skill set has served me well. And I'm looking to improve myself. And I'm also looking to improve those efficiencies. And honestly, Dan's board of Dan, Jay, and Todd did some incredible things to set, I believe, my board up for success. Now, if he would have gotten the paid time off, instead of the sick time and vacation, I think we would be in a much better position now. But then I also feel like I'm strong enough to say to the elected officials who give backlash that I'm sorry, run for commissioner, but this is my decision and I'm sticking to it. And I had to do that with expenditure policy 930. It was a little bit of tug of war, but I valued the feedback because I didn't know how it was going to affect their operations. And when I found out, I made adjustments and I stayed within the law. So it is a perception issue, I think. I just happen to like it.
Thank you for both of you for your prior service and your current service. I know it's not an easy job. So thank you for all that you guys do and have done.
Sherry? Kristen? It's getting late. I imagine a lot of people are getting done. Joan?
I just have, I guess, more of a statement. Commissioner Duncan, I have watched you be very thoughtful and do a lot of research and stuff. And I think we as voting members of the public need to really vet our candidates that we're electing to make sure that they have the skill sets necessary for the job.
Kurt? Bruce? Brian Cleary? Brian, you there? Phil? Oh, there.
Thank you.
Phil, any questions?
No, Bill, no questions.
I think you two have just hit the jackpot. Dave, did you want anything?
Oh, no.
That's it. You've hit the jackpot, folks. I want to thank you very much. And now you can express your appreciation without delaying things.
I'm going to defer some of these other items.
I think so. It's almost 8:30.
Yeah.
Board, can I interrupt for just a minute here? Conversations? That's what I'm trying to interrupt for. We have some conversation. Folks, if you could take conversations outside, we're still trying to run a meeting here. Ladies and gentlemen, this meeting is not complete. If you want to have a conversation, please take it outside so we can complete the meeting.
I'm sorry, one last thing, folks. You are all invited to spend a day with me. Okay? Just let me know. I'm happy to show you around. And just you can see exactly what I do every day. And I'd like it.
Thank you, Commissioner Duncan. Okay, we have still is the list of potential candidates for interviews. It is almost 8:30. We have been running long tonight. We've been a 3-hour meeting so far. Do we want to push that off until next week?
Yes, please.
I have several
On
yeses.
the mic, yes.
Should I just take a poll?
Yes.
I agree.
We will push off the list of potential candidates for interviews, prioritizing, etc., and the interview questions, I take it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
We will push both of those items off until next week.
Can I make a suggestion though?
Certainly.
Do that at the beginning and go through as quickly as possible before we get into interviewees, or because I think we're going to run into this problem every time.
I think we'll have this problem with the commissioners. I'm not sure we will have this same problem with the row officials. If Steve Matheson was any indication, it won't take as long to talk to the row officials.
Then should we go ahead and go through the questions and get them done as quickly as possible to get them out to them so they have the time to formulate their opinions? Otherwise, it's a week, we're not. Because now we're going to be giving the questions to other interviewees, but some have not had them. So, you see what I'm saying? Having it be as
You're suggesting get them prepared before we leave next week so that they can be handed out to the incoming folks after that.
Okay. Yeah. Is that agreeable? Regardless of the time, we lock down the interview questions next week. Yes.
Yeah, seems reasonable.
Poll. Lock down the questions next week, regardless of the time. Hands up. 1, 2, 3,
I agree.
4.
Let's put off paying till another week.
Okay, we did get a majority for that, so we will go ahead and push that off. But we will lock that down. The interview questions will be locked down next week. The candidates, we can still have some room because we already know that we're going to be dealing with the row officials and also with several of the chief deputies before we get to that.
Right.
So we can push the candidate list easily.
I'll bring my laptop and we can work on them in real time at the meeting, so we can just finish them up there.
Okay, sounds good, Brian.
Roll.
So with that, I believe we have just reached, let's see, no, I'm sorry, Nancy, we have confirmed the other 2 commissioners for next week. Okay, she's saying yes. I saw an invitation in the email for the row officials. Have any of them responded?
Barry McHugh has let us know that he has 2 of those dates available, so we can start to narrow that down. Coroner Keene would like to see the questions so he can sort of determine how much time he needs to prepare before he chooses a week.
Okay, and that's all we've got so far is just the 2 responding? Okay, so we still have 3 outstanding issues.
So Nancy will just coordinate that with them, right? Yeah.
We will be meeting the 14th, the 21st, the 28th. 14th will be the county commissioners. 21st, 28th, and August 3rd, not 4th. I believe we have a conflict on Wednesday, August 4th. We cannot have the room, so we'll be meeting on Tuesday, August 3rd.
Oh.
Correct, Nancy? Okay. August 3rd, August 11th, August 18th. That should bring us to the end of both the row officials and the chief deputies, so that August 25th, then September 1st, 8th, 15th, 22nd, and 29th will be the interviews that will be settling in the next few weeks. At some point in there, we would be bringing in probably public comment. I would like to try and get the interviews, the testimony finished up in September if we can. I would rather not see this drag out too much longer because we have a lot to do when we start to deliberate. So we will settle on the number of people that we'll be talking to probably in 2 weeks. But we'll be looking at the interview questions next week.
Dave,
Yes.
are we still planning on only having 2 individuals at a time? I'm just wondering when we get to the row officials, if some of the questions will be more programmatic, that we can't just that we can't handle more. I'm only saying that with the idea that maybe we can finish a little earlier and that we can open it up to some of these other folks at the end. I'm afraid we're going to run out of time.
So you're suggesting maybe we could get 3 of them in a week?
It's just a suggestion. I can see the advantages and disadvantages of either way, but if we had, as several people noted here when Mr. Matheson spoke, he was pretty succinct, and we kind of got the information that we needed from him fairly quickly. That might be the case with the other row officials, or with their deputies, or I'm just throwing that out as something to think about to speed it up a bit. I don't think it would necessarily make it any longer. This was a long one, and I'm hoping that as we get better at this, myself included, that we become more succinct and we ask the questions and kind of are able to dig down if we need to, but we don't have to revisit some of the same questions, because I think that's what kept happening. It was just a little nuance here and a little nuance there, and it's taking us a long time.
It is. I think it's important that we get the best information, the fullest information that we can.
I agree.
If it is possible, when we get to the row officials or the chief deputies, to bring 2, 3, 4 in an evening. Steve Matheson was an indication.
Yeah.
We may well be able to bring in more than 2. But until we get there and find out, I don't know how to deal with that right now.
Okay.
I mean, I don't want to put a time limit on and say, you only have a half hour to speak, or you only have 20 minutes to speak. Because I think that they are giving us more information, even though it is long. I think it's important that we get that information.
Okay.
So I don't know how to answer your question. I don't know whether we can, but we'll try to be open about it and fluid and see what we can do.
Well, I know that I'm only mentioning it now because Nancy's reaching out to people, and if people are flexible in their schedules, then we can know that if it looks like we can put 3 people in, then we can move the schedule up. I just want her to give people options.
Right now, we have not formally asked the row officials for any specific date. What we have done is given them 3 dates and say, when are you available?
Okay.
And we were going to try and work in 2 a night. Oh, we've already spoken with Steve. That would leave 2 nights and 1 alone on a 3rd night, where we could start talking to chief deputies or someone else.
Mm-hmm.
But we're trying to work out a schedule for that right now that works with them. Not
and I realize
dictated.
It's hard, Nancy. Thank you. I would.
One thing that hopefully I could do to help. I know.
Tamara, could you unmute while Nancy's talking?
Thank you. I know the electeds pretty well. So, for example, I could have told you that Steve Matheson would probably be more succinct. So, what I can do as feedback to what you've just shared is, if we can get 3 on one night that I think will be like that, I'll go ahead and I'll book 3, and then on a week when it's like, no, I think they're going to have more to share. Next week I think you're dead on with the commissioners that 2 in a night will probably be pretty full evening, especially with trying to do the interview questions and such. And I did want to share The one I emailed out to you as far as the potential interviewees this afternoon, we did have some people email in some additions to that. So this printed copy does have a few names that your email copy did not. So I just wanted you to be aware of that.
Okay.
Okay.
So
I'm happy to help.
this is the
Thank
one
you,
she
Nancy.
gave us, right? Yes.
I believe that leads us to the end of the agenda. Do I hear anything more that we need to discuss?
Move to adjourn.
There we go. That was a quick one. Did we get a second? We have a second.
Who seconded Tamara?
Tamara,
Thank you.
call for a vote.
Yeah. What time you have?
It is done. I have 8:30 exactly.
8:30.